Chapter 691. Clang, above the sea, the green-eyed boy, who was shrouded in green light, began to draw his sword slowly. Buzz, less than an inch after the battle-sword was out of the scabbard, countless rays of dazzling green light gushed out from the scabbard. It was extremely dazzling. Green screen sword. Sato Kawasaki's eyes lit up and he was shocked. It was said that the green-eyed boy had two divine weapons in his hands. One was the Black Wind Sword, which was made by his master, the Japanese Ghost King. The material used for this sword was completely different from other weapons. It was neither gold nor silver, nor copper or iron. Instead, it was refined with extreme inchi. It was an invisible divine weapon with strong killing intent and overbearing power. The other battle sword was the green screen sword in the green-eyed boy's hand. It was said that the green-eyed boy once obtained a piece of meteorite iron that fell into the sea in ancient times by chance. This piece of meteorite iron had been silent at the bottom of the sea for thousands of years and had absorbed enough spiritual chi of heaven and earth and the essence of the sun and moon. Later, due to the volcanic eruption at the bottom of the sea, this piece of meteorite iron, which was the size of 2 fists and emitted a green light, was washed ashore by the torrent and was obtained by the green-eyed boy who was practicing his sword skills by the sea. After obtaining the rare meteorite iron, the green-eyed boy was overjoyed. Under the guidance of his master, the Japanese Ghost King, he spent nearly 3 years to forge this piece of meteorite iron into a peerless battle sword. It was said that when this saber was produced, the entire saber was shrouded in a layer of dazzling green light. If this saber was swung, there would be a green curtain of light trailing behind the saber. It was brilliant and dazzling. Because this sword had a green light curtain accompanying it, and it was related to the green-eyed boy, it was named the green screen sword. It had the same name as the green-eyed boy but different characters. Good sword. Bamu Chongqing, who was standing next to Onijiro, said after seeing the battle sword in the green-eyed boy's hand. It is indeed a good sword. Onijiro nodded and smiled. After the long sword was unsheathed, the green-eyed boy in the green light column held the sword with one hand and tapped the void with the tip of his foot. His figure disappeared in a flash. Ghostly steps. Onijiro raised his eyebrows and exclaimed in his heart. When he was in Dongying, he had heard from the experts in the spell world that the Dongying Ghost King had once created a peerless movement technique. It was extremely fast, like a ghost. It was called the ghost step. This movement technique combined spiritual energy and special technique. Once it was used, it could be said to come and go without a trace. It was unpredictable and could arrive in the blink of an eye. Now, it seemed that this was not a lie. The blue-eyed boy's astonishing movement technique caused all the experts present to be secretly shocked. This ghost steps was indeed like a ghost, drifting and unpredictably. Funakoshi Shinichi squinted his eyes, Kamehameha stroked his long beard, Sato Kawa Akane smiled evilly, and Fujita Takashi put down the wine jug beside his mouth and looked for traces of the green-eyed boy. As the saying goes, the layman enjoys the show while the expert appreciates the skill. Being able to observe the movements and footwork of top-notch experts was extremely beneficial to these top-notch experts. One had to know that in a battle between experts, victory or defeat was often decided in an instant, and in the process of fighting with an enemy, the speed of one's movements would determine the outcome of the battle to a large extent. Whoosh! Just when the experts were amazed by the lightning-fast ghost steps, the green-eyed boy's figure suddenly appeared above Yi Fan's head, less than 10 feet away from Yi Fan. Swoosh! In midair, the green-eyed boy's eyes shone with a green light as he held the sword with both hands and slashed down at Yi Fan, who was standing on the deck below. Swoosh! As the green-eyed boy swung his sword rapidly, a dazzling green light screen appeared from above, like a green waterfall pouring down in torrents. Green screen slash. The fourth of the 5 disciples, Kato Nagato, exclaimed excitedly in his heart. The eldest Shixiang is indeed the eldest Shixiang. His moves are indeed different. The peerless movement technique ghost steps of fleeting wind shadow, the peerless speed and peerless saber technique green curtain slash, in addition to the excellent angle of attack, the three complemented each other perfectly. It was simply a perfect killing move. With this slash, the arrogant Yi Fan would definitely be split in half. With that thought in mind, Kato Nagato's face showed a hint of pride. This time, as long as he could kill Yi Fan in one hit, the eldest Shixiang's status among the experts would skyrocket. By that time, not only the eldest Shixiang, the green-eyed boy, but also the four of them would be proud. Reincarnation of Eldritch, crossing the heavenly tribulation, king of the devil realm. Under the green screen slash, all of them were just a pile of minced meat. Buffon Kun, watch out. At the moment when the green-eyed boy swung his sword, Akatsuki hurriedly shouted at Yi Fan. Swoosh. As soon as Akatsuki's voice trailed off, the green light screen slashed down on Yi Fan's head. Swoosh. In the blink of an eye, Yi Fan's shadow flashed and disappeared from his original spot. What? The blue-robed man, Kato Sato, could not believe what he saw in front of him. The slash was less than an inch away from the gigolo's head. How did this guy disappear in an instant? Kato Sato's eyes widened in horror. In his mind, the scene of him fighting with this gigolo in the cave suddenly appeared. At that time, this guy seemed to have changed into another person. His movement technique was so fast that it was unimaginable, far beyond his imagination. Now, that strange movement technique of his had appeared once again. Kato Sato thought. Seeing that Yi Fan had disappeared into thin air, the experts' faces changed. Although the green-eyed boy's ghostly steps was powerful, Yi Fan's movement technique was even more shocking. Boom! Following a loud noise, the green-eyed boy's slash slashed into the deck, forming a huge crack that was more than 3 feet long and 5 inches wide. Puff! A water curtain gushed out from the huge crack, more than 10 feet tall. The green-eyed boy's slash had penetrated the warship in an instant, causing the seawater to pour in. In midair, the green-eyed boy, whose robes were fluttering, held the saber in his hand. His eyes were flashing with green light as he focused on searching for Yi Fan's trace. At this time, he was frowning, his face full of shock. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that his ghostly steps and green screen slash, which he was so proud of, could be avoided so easily. It was said that this guy had been reborn in the demon-slaying conference. He was in the limelight and defeated all the expert. Now, it seemed that the rumors were not groundless. The green-eyed boy thought as he held the green screen slash in front of him. He used all his senses to search for Yi Fan, who had disappeared into thin air. However, at this time, Yi Fan seemed to have disappeared into thin air. No matter how hard he searched, he could not find him. At this time, not only the green-eyed boy, but all the experts on the deck also looked up and looked around. Each of them tried their best to search for Yi Fan's trace. Onijiro had a smirk on his face as he lowered his head and did not say anything. Funakoshi Shinichi curled his lips and kept a secret. Kamehameha looked up at the void and narrowed his eyes. Chi Yao, who was dressed in white, put her hands behind her back and walked slowly to the deck of the ship. She looked at the sky with a smile. Fujita Takashi's face was solemn. He raised his eyebrows and looked up, searching the airspace above. In terms of eyesight, Fujita Takashi was the best among all the experts. His eyesight was not limited to the yin-yang eyes. If his eyesight was used to the extreme, he could even see the grass and trees 100 miles away. Suddenly, Fujita Takashi's face changed greatly. Yi Fan, who was dressed in a black robe, with a golden crown and silver hair, slowly appeared behind the green-eyed boy out of thin air. At this time, the green-eyed boy was still searching hard. Seeing Yi Fan suddenly appear, all the experts on the deck of the ship instantly narrowed their eyes. Yi Fan had been hiding behind the green-eyed boy all this time. However, they did not notice it at all. What kind of cultivation did he have to be to do that? They guessed correctly. Yi Fan had already appeared behind the green-eyed boy the moment he disappeared from the deck of the ship. He used the power of the heavenly demon to hide his figure and completely hid his aura. He quietly looked at the green-eyed boy who had his back facing him. "Green-eyed boy, that's all there is to it," Yi Fan, who was floating behind the green-eyed boy, said softly. After hearing Yi Fan's voice, the green-eyed boy, who was looking down, suddenly raised his head. His eyes were full of shock. Yi Fan was right behind him. However, he did not know at all. When the green-eyed boy thought of this, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine and his hair stood on end. The green-eyed boy was indeed the leader of the 5 boys. In a critical situation, he was not flustered and did not panic. When he knew that Yi Fan was standing behind him, he suddenly turned around and swept his saber behind him. The saber followed the person and the person turned with the saber. The green screen saber once again dragged out a dazzling green screen of saber, forming a huge green screen halo with the green-eyed boy as the center. With the body movement technique and the speed of the swing, the dazzling green screen saber instantly swung towards Yi Fan's neck. However, this time, Yi Fan did not dodge. When the saber was less than an inch away from his neck, Yi Fan quickly extended his right hand and used his thumb and index finger to lightly pinch the incoming saber. Clang! The dazzling green screen saber was instantly stopped by Yi Fan's pinch. Whoosh! The airflow created by the saber blew Yi Fan's silver hair gently. Baka! When the green-eyed boy saw that his saber was pinched by Yi Fan's 2 fingers, he immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation and scolded. He held the handle of the saber with both hands and suddenly exerted force, wanting to pull the saber back. However, Yi Fan's 2 fingers seemed to be embedded in the green screen saber. No matter how he tried to pull back, the saber did not move at all. Baka! Baka! The green-eyed boy's face turned red and he could not stop cursing. When Yi Fan saw that the green-eyed boy was cursing, he immediately lifted his leg and kicked the green-eyed boy's chest. Bang! With Yi Fan's powerful kick, the green-eyed boy's saber instantly fell out of his hand and rapidly fell towards the deck of the battleship below. The speed of his fall was so fast that it was like a bullet that had just been fired. Boom! The green-eyed boy landed heavily on the battleship, creating a human shape on the deck. Ugh! The prideful green-eyed boy's mouth was bleeding. He struggled to stand up from the deck, but he did not succeed. Senior brother, when Kano saw that the green-eyed boy was defeated, he immediately ran over to help him. Go away! The green-eyed boy, whose mouth was full of blood, pushed Kano away and staggered to stand up. It's such a waste for you to use such a good saber, said Yi Fan, who was floating in midair as he casually threw the green screen saber in his hand. Clang! Chapter 692. Baka! Baka! The staggering green-eyed boy roared as he pulled out the green screen saber that was stabbed into the ground beside him. He held the blade with both hands, twisted his body, and quickly pulled it up towards Yi Fan. Swish! Swish! The green-eyed boy flew into a rage out of humiliation and waved his blade twice. 2 dazzling green saber arcs were rapidly released from the green screen saber and instantly formed a cross. As they rotated, they charged towards Yi Fan, who was in midair. Its speed was as fast as lightning. Cha! The huge blade arc tore the air apart and let out a sharp whistling sound. Seeing that the green-eyed boy did not know how to retreat, Yi Fan, who was floating in midair, squinted his eyes and said coldly, overestimating yourself and asking for humiliation. Facing the whistling cross-shaped blade arc, Yi Fan did something that made all the experts speechless. His body moved and his shadow swayed. Instead of retreating, he moved forward and activated his exceptional movement technique and fell towards the direction of the cross-shaped blade arc. At the same time, Yi Fan stretched out one leg and kicked the cross-shaped blade arc at high speed. Swish! Yi Fan's falling speed was so fast that a white conical chi shield formed at the tip of his feet and let out an extremely sharp sound. The scene in front of them caused all the experts' faces to change. According to their predictions, Yi Fan would use two methods to deal with the green-eyed boy's cross-shaped blade arc. The first method was to rely on his incomparably exquisite and strange body movement to directly dodge the green-eyed boy's cross-shaped blade arcs and avoid its sharpness. The second method was to use his incomparably profound spiritual energy to disperse the cross-shaped blade arcs and destroy them. They never thought that Yi Fan would retreat instead of advancing, and directly use his body to pounce on the green-eyed boy's blade aura. This was simply a suicidal way of fighting. The green-eyed boy's blade aura was so sharp that it could even cut through such a huge and sturdy warship like tofu, let alone a body. This young man was too arrogant, no, not arrogant, but evil, evil to the bone. All the experts were shocked. Buffon-kun, be careful. When she saw that Yi Fan did not use his most proficient movement technique and spirit energy but instead fought with his physical body, Akatsuki, who was on the deck, shouted anxiously. Yi Fan, who was descending from the sky at high speed, was expressionless. His eyes were cold, and his silver hair, which was tied up with a golden crown, shot up high. Then, he came crashing down like Mount Tai. The speculations of the experts were not wrong. He could indeed rely on his impressive spiritual power and unparalleled movement to easily avoid the green-eyed boy's cross-shaped blade arc, but he did not do so. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that almost all the masters were gathered on the deck to convince everyone of his strength, including Qi Yao. The reason why Yi Fan had done this was not because he wanted to show off how powerful he was or how powerful his cultivation was. Instead, he wanted to use this incident as a warning to those who were hostile towards him. Whoever dared to provoke him or hurt the people he cared about would have to pay a painful price for it. This time, he was going to make an example out of them. And this blue-eyed boy was that chicken waiting to be slaughtered. Today, even if he did not kill the blue-eyed boy, he wanted to severely injure him and make him remember. Yi Fan thought in his heart. His gaze turned cold, and he increased the strength of his leg by 30%. In the blink of an eye, the huge cross-shaped blade arc, which was spinning non-stop, collided with Yi Fan, who was descending from the sky. Hong, a loud sound was heard, the green light splashed, and the airwaves dispersed. The sharp cross-shaped blade arc was instantly crushed by Yi Fan's single foot, turning into bits of green light fragments, and dissipating. The blue-eyed boy's expression froze. There was always someone better than you. At this moment, he finally understood the true meaning of these 8 words. He had thought that he could not defeat Yi Fan because his movement technique was not as good as the other party, and his own blade art was still feared by the other party. But now it seemed that he had thought too much. The blade art that he was so proud of, and relied on to become famous, was actually crushed by the other party's physical body. The difference in cultivation between him and Yi Fan was not just a little bit. When the experts on the deck saw this, they first opened their eyes wide, and then they all fell silent. The smile on Onijiro's face disappeared instantly, Bamu Chongqing's face turned solemn, Kamehameha started to frown, and Shinichi Funakoshi started to squint his eyes. The man in blue, Takashi Fujita, was stunned, as if he was in a dream. Takashi Fujita, who was holding the wine pot, was shocked, and his face changed greatly. Keo Nagato, one of the 5 children, was so shocked that his mouth was half open, and he was tongue-tied. Qi Yao, who was dressed in white, looked up and gasped, and the smile on his face disappeared. Even though this 3-inch-tall green-eyed boy was extremely arrogant and condescending, his movement technique and blade technique were not to be trifled with. Yi Fan had used his physical body to crush his blade arc in an instant. This was rather unexpected for him. Yi Fan's goal of shocking the experts could be said to have been achieved. Swoosh, after crushing the blue-eyed boy's blade arc, Yi Fan did not change his movement technique, nor did he reduce his speed. Instead, he quickly stepped on the blue-eyed boy who was stunned on the deck. He wanted to leave a painful scene in the blue-eyed boy's memory, and he wanted to leave a mark on his body, to warn the others. If the blue-eyed boy was stepped on, he would be skinned alive even if he did not die. Elder Shiseong, Kao Nagato shouted as he used his movement technique to rush toward the blue-eyed boy. He wanted to save his elder Shiseong. A white shadow flew up and went straight toward the blue-eyed boy. However, as the saying goes, don't be afraid of not knowing what's good, but being afraid of comparing. Compared to the ordinary experts, Kao Nagato's movement technique was as fast as a shadow, and he came and went like the wind. However, compared to Yi Fan's movement technique, he was like a toddler, and he was as slow as an old bull. When he was less than a foot away, Yi Fan had already landed on the ground, and his feet were less than 3 feet away from the blue-eyed boy. Elder Shiseong, Kao Nagato screamed in pain when he saw this. Although the blue-eyed boy was cunning to others, he was completely selfless and sincere to the 4 of them. Now that he saw that his elder Shiseong was being toyed with by Chen Xiaobei, and there was nothing he could do to help, Kao Nagato was heartbroken. If his 5th brother, Chinkong Iha, was here, they would not have to suffer such humiliation. The blue-eyed boy closed his eyes and waited for his death. He was the one who provoked Chen Xiaobei, and his cultivation was not as good as Chen Xiaobei's. He was ready to show his face, but he accidentally exposed his butt. Sifu, I'm sorry. I've embarrassed you. I'll take my leave first. The blue-eyed boy apologized to his master, the Dongying Phantom King. Swoosh, just as the tip of Yi Fan's foot was less than a foot away from the blue-eyed boy's head, a resplendent white light suddenly appeared in front of the blue-eyed boy and shielded him behind it. In the dazzling white light, a young man in a white cloak stood there. The man looked majestic, his eyebrows were sharp, his eyes were sharp, his lips were red and his teeth were white. He looked like Bufon, surrounded by spiritual qi, and surrounded by white light. On the back of his fluttering white cloak, there was an elegant and crazily written word, Crane, written in black. After seeing this person, Kao Nagato's tears almost flowed out. This person was none other than the top warrior ranked 5th among the 5 children of Japan. He was ranked 1st in terms of combat power, an expert among experts, Kazuru Kayokata. 5th brother. Kao Nagato shouted for Chinkong Iha as he flew. 5th brother is here. Elder Shiseong is saved. Step back. Within the white light, Kazuku Yashimizu's cloak fluttered in the wind as he looked at Yi Fan, who was descending from the sky. He then said to Kao Nagato, who was rushing over. At first, Kao Nagato was stunned. Then, he suddenly realized what was going on. Just as he was activating his body technique, Yi Fan's single leg had already rushed in front of Kazuku Fairyland. Crane in the clear sky narrowed his eyes and suddenly struck out with his palm. The speed of his palm strike was as fast as lightning. Even Fujita Tsuyoshi, who was known for his eyesight, could only barely keep up with it. Boom! Yi Fan's foot and Chinkong Iha's palm collided with each other, making a deafening sound. Whoosh! The violent blast of air blew a crane in the clear sky's cloak, which had the word Crane written on it, up high in the air. It also fluttered Yi Fan's 8 treasures jade gauze brocade robe. Bang! At the moment when their hands and feet collided, the huge battleship sank by 5 feet. Swoosh! A translucent and formless shockwave spread out between the 2 of them at an extremely fast speed, and the shockwave dispersed in all directions. Kacha! The deck under Chinkong Iha's feet cracked. Boom! The rapid sinking of the battleship caused the seawater around the battleship to surge up into the air. The impact of Yi Fan's fall was so strong that it could be seen. Plop, plop! The ninjas on the battleship who were watching the battle were instantly shaken by the huge impact and fell to the ground, battered and exhausted. Even the experts displayed their abilities and steadied themselves. Whoosh! The seawater that had surged up into the air gradually fell back into the sea, creating huge ripples. The scene in front of them shocked them. They were shocked by Yi Fan's tyrannical strength, but they were also shocked by Crane in a clear sky's peerless cultivation. This person could block Yi Fan's fierce attack with one palm. His cultivation was unimaginably high. The experts were not the only ones who were shocked. Yi Fan was also shocked. This Chinkong Iha was indeed as Onijiro and Jinchan had said. He was at the peak of his cultivation. Mr. Iha, that was a good palm strike, Yi Fan said as he retracted his foot and slowly descended from the air. Mr. Yi, thank you for letting me win, Chinkong Iha said to Yi Fan with a smile as he retracted his right palm. What's wrong? Mr. Crane, do you want to stand up for him? Yi Fan, who had landed on both feet, asked Clear Sky Crane directly. His tone was calm yet cold. Mr. Yi, please calm down, Chinkong Iha said to Yi Fan. Mr. Yi, what did my senior brother do wrong to make you so angry? Chinkong Iha's expression was calm. His tone was polite, but neither servile nor overbearing. You can ask your senior brother, Yi Fan said as he looked at the blue-eyed boy standing behind Chinkong Iha. His gaze was as sharp as a knife. I also want to know what happened that made you almost tear my warship apart. Matsumoto Takayoshi's voice came from behind Yi Fan. Matsumoto Takayoshi, who was wearing a large gray robe, accompanied by the white-clothed man, came to the front of the crowd with a gloomy face. When the experts saw Matsumoto Takayoshi come in person, they immediately bowed their heads to greet him. Mr. Matsumoto, Chinkong Iha nodded to Matsumoto Takayoshi. Matsumoto Takayoshi responded. What happened? Matsumoto Takayoshi first looked at Yi Fan, then looked at the blue-eyed boy and asked with a gloomy face. Chapter 693. Mr. Matsumoto, this Yi Fan attacked my big brother just because of his cultivation. Mr. Matsumoto, please investigate this matter. Seeing the change in the green-eyed boy's expression, the fourth disciple, Kato Nagato, cupped his hands and complained to Matsumoto Takayoshi. In fact, he knew very well why Yi Fan attacked the green-eyed boy. When he and the green-eyed boy went out to carry out a mission and returned to the deck, he suddenly sensed two streams of extreme yin-chi coming from the boat where Yi Fan was. These two streams of extreme yin-chi were very different from the aura of ordinary ghosts. These two streams of extreme yin-chi were extremely pure, but they were also filled with evil chi. It was extremely unusual. The two of them were the disciples of the Japanese Ghost King, so they were very sensitive to ghosts and otherworldly items. Therefore, after sensing these two streams of extreme yin-chi, they both frowned. They had been disciples of the Japanese Ghost King for so many years, but they had never seen such pure yin-chi. Kato Nagato wanted to check it out, but when he remembered that it was Yi Fan's territory, he immediately gave up the idea. Although he sensed that Yi Fan was not in the boat, he still knew about Yi Fan's style and cultivation. The tragic scene when Yi Fan killed Nobita Renkawa was still vivid in his mind. It was rumored that this person had already passed the heavenly tribulation during the demon-slaying conference. He had undergone the nirvana of the phoenix and was reborn from the flames. He had been reborn, and his cultivation was no longer what it used to be. Under such circumstances, even if he was given a few more guts, he would not dare to set his sights on Yi Fan. He did not want to touch this bad luck, nor did he dare to touch it. However, the green-eyed boy did not think so. As for Yi Fan's position among the experts, he had always harbored a grudge and hatred in his heart. Matsumoto Takayoshi's attitude toward Yi Fan could be said to be very polite and respectful. He even said in front of the masters that he was like a tiger that had grown wings and a dragon that had obtained a pearl. However, he did not care about the leader of the 5 disciples at all. His attitude was normal, and he did not have the slightest intention of using him. He felt indignant towards Matsumoto Takayoshi for having eyes but failing to see. At the same time, he felt that the heavens were unfair to him for not being recognized for his talent. He was even more resentful towards Yi Fan's arrogant attitude. Therefore, when he sensed that Yi Fan was not in the East Sea and that there was an extreme Inchi ghost on the boat, the green-eyed boy felt that his chance had come. He wanted to take this opportunity to warn Yi Fan not to be so arrogant in the future. After making up his mind, Green-Eyed Boy ignored Nagato and Kano's persuasion and went straight to Yi Fan's sleeping cabin and attacked the two ghosts Zhang and Wei. In fact, for the two ghosts, the Green-Eyed Boy did not need to guess to know that they were Yi Fan's people. Yi Fan's spiritual chi cultivation was extremely high, and he had the Leaf Fire divine weapon. His yang chi was extremely strong. Unless the ghosts were tired of living, they would not dare to approach him easily. After a fruitless interrogation, the Green-Eyed Boy, who was known for his ruthlessness, thought of a way to torture the two ghosts. He first tied the two ghosts to the pillar with the Een binding technique, and then used the Een suppression talisman to suppress their life ghost spirit. Finally, he opened the porthole and guided the sunlight into the cabin to shine on the two ghosts. The purpose was to make their ghost spirits dissipate and die. The reason why the Green-Eyed Boy dared to do this was naturally after careful reasoning. He learned from the battleship ninja that Yi Fan and Akatsuki had gone out, and they had just left. As for Yi Fan's travel habits, Green-Eyed Boy was well aware of them. Every time Yi Fan went out, it would take at least 2 or 3 days, and at most 7 or 8 days. This trip would not be short, and the two ghosts were restrained by the Een binding technique and the Een suppression talisman. Coupled with the scorching sun, they could not last for more than half a day. In other words, before Yi Fan returned, the two ghosts would have already dissipated and turned into nothingness. At that time, even if Yi Fan wanted to know who did it, he would have no clue and no way to investigate. Among all the masters, the Green-Eyed Boy was not the only one who knew the ghost path technique. However, as the saying goes, there is no story without coincidence. This time, Yi Fan happened to rush back in less than half a day and saved the two ghosts when they were about to dissipate. The Green-Eyed Boy had calculated everything, but in the end, he still calculated himself. Is that so, Green-Eyed Boy? After listening to Kato Nagato's words, Matsumoto Takeyoshi stared into the eyes of the Green-Eyed Boy and asked calmly. Matsumoto Takeyoshi did not believe a word of what Kato Nagato said. Indeed, Yi Fan had an unruly nature and did things his own way. However, he was a person with strong principles. Although this person's cultivation was heaven-defying, he had never used his strength to bully the weak. This could be seen from the fact that he saved the ninjas on the warship. When Yi Fan saved the ninja, the white-robed man, Yamada Shingo, happened to see this scene and told Matsumoto Takeyoshi about it. After Matsumoto Takeyoshi heard this, he was very emotional. Although he and Yi Fan were not on good terms, Matsumoto Takeyoshi admired Yi Fan and saw him in a new light. Whether a person was good or evil could be seen from how he treated those who were one level lower than him. To judge a person's character, it was often not based on his performance when he was poor and had no skills, but based on his performance when he was rich and had outstanding ability. Some people were kind, modest, and courteous when they were poor and had no skills to rely on. However, when they had a new lease of life, and were able to cover the sky with one hand, they would show their true colors. They would be respectful and condescending, and would act like a vile person. The reason was that they were different on the surface and the inside. In this world, there were not many people who could maintain their true colors, be the same on the surface, and not be moved by external things. It could be said that it was very difficult to find in the world, and it could be said that it was very rare. And Yi Fan was one of them. This person had a lot of money, but he was never arrogant and domineering. He had a lot of skills, but he never bullied the weak. It was rare and precious to be able to do this. On the other hand, Green-Eyed Boy was a narrow-minded person. As the leader of the 5 children of Japan, he was very capable, but he was very jealous and arrogant. He could not tolerate others being above him. It was also because of this that Matsumoto Takeyoshi had always been indifferent to Green-Eyed Boy. Today's matter clearly showed that Green-Eyed Boy had offended Yi Fan, and Yi Fan had to teach him a lesson. However, although Matsumoto Takeyoshi knew that Green-Eyed Boy was at fault, he wanted to hear his explanation. The reason was very simple. He wanted to see how Green-Eyed Boy would explain. If Green-Eyed Boy told him the truth, he might put him in an important position and entrust him with important tasks. If Green-Eyed Boy hid something from him, or even made up nonsense and slandered him, then he would chase him back to Japan and never use him again. For a person who lied to his master, the more capable he was, the more dangerous he was. For such a person, it was better to have nothing than to have something substandard. Mr. Matsumoto, can I explain this matter to you alone? Green-Eyed Boy, whose expression was uncertain, asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. He was a person who cared about his reputation. He did not dare to lie to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, nor did he want to admit his mistake in public. That was why he came up with this plan. Say it here. Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was good at reading people, saw through Green-Eyed Boy's thoughts and said with a sullen face, "This." Green-Eyed Boy did not expect Matsumoto Takeyoshi to reject his request. As the saying goes, even if you don't give the monk face, you have to give the Buddha face. He thought that as the eldest disciple of the Japanese Ghost King, even if Matsumoto Takeyoshi did not give him face, he would give the Japanese Ghost King a way out. However, he was wrong. The reason why Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked him to tell the truth in public was to give him a chance. Mr. Matsumoto, this matter was my fault first. Green-Eyed Boy hesitated for a moment and told the truth to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Since Yi Fan knew that he was the instigator, it proved that the two ghosts were not dead. If he lied now, it would be like burying his head in the sand. After Matsumoto Takeyoshi heard this, his expression was calm and he did not speak. Green-Eyed Boy was honest and did not lie to him. How is it, Mr. Ichikaku, I did not wrong your eldest disciple, right? Yi Fan looked up at Chinkong Iha and asked calmly. Chinkong Iha turned around and glanced at Green-Eyed Boy standing behind him. He frowned slightly. The truth could not be clearer. His eldest disciple, Green-Eyed Boy, did make a mistake, so Yi Fan taught him a lesson. Mr. Yi, my eldest disciple has offended you. I apologize to you on his behalf. Chinkong Iha turned around to face Yi Fan and bowed to Yi Fan as he spoke. He almost killed the two ghosts that I took in. What, Mr. Ichikaku wants to settle this matter with a bow. Yi Fan raised his eyebrows and asked Chinkong Iha. If he had not returned in time, the two ghosts would have turned into ashes by now. If he did not give an explanation, he would not be able to explain it to the two ghosts. After Chinkong Iha heard this, he slowly straightened up. He looked sideways at Green-Eyed Boy, who lowered his head and did not speak, then turned his head to look at Yi Fan with a cold expression. He slowly stretched out his right palm. Buzz, countless rays of dazzling white light shot out from Chinkong Iha's palm. Seeing this, Yi Fan narrowed his eyes and became alert. The two palms behind his back slowly clenched into fists. Chinkong Iha's ability was not something that Green-Eyed Boy could compare to. He had to take this seriously. However, just as Yi Fan was waiting for Chinkong Iha to make his move, the next scene instantly made his pupils contract. He saw Chinkong Iha turn his right palm, which was glowing with white light, towards himself in an instant. Then, he suddenly slammed it towards his own chest. The speed was so fast that it was like lightning. Following a deafening sound, Chinkong Iha's palm slammed heavily onto his own chest. A mouthful of blood spurted out from Chinkong Iha's mouth. Blood splattered everywhere. This scene instantly made everyone present dumbfounded. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's eyes were wide open. Shingo Yamada's eyes were filled with shock. Chi Yao's brows were tightly knitted together. Onijiro's brows raised slightly. Funakoshi Shinichi's expression was solemn, and he kept shaking his head. The rest of the elites were even more shocked, and were stunned on the spot. They did not expect Chinkong Iha to use such a method to apologize to Green-Eyed Boy. For a moment the battleship was dead silent. Only the sound of water gushing out from the cracks on the deck could be heard. "Fifth brother!" Green-Eyed Boy shouted, and reached out to support Chinkong Iha, who was staggering. "Fifth brother!" Kato Nagato also rushed over to support Chinkong Iha. Chinkong Iha's face was pale, and he reached out to push the two of them away. He then raised his head and looked at Yi Fan, his eyes calm and determined. "Mr. Yi, are you satisfied with this slap?" Chinkong Iha, who was bleeding from the corner of his mouth, asked Yi Fan. Yi Fan frowned and looked at Chinkong Iha. His eyes were filled with shock, and he did not answer. "If you are not satisfied, I will give you another slap," Chinkong Iha said, and gathered his strength again. Buzz, the bright white light appeared again, and Chinkong Iha raised his hand again, and slapped himself. Swoosh! When Chinkong Iha's hand was less than 3 inches away from his chest, Yi Fan used his ultimate movement skill, and a white shadow suddenly appeared in front of Chinkong Iha, as fast as lightning. Slap! Yi Fan reached out and grabbed Chinkong Iha's wrist. Chinkong Iha's hand stopped. "I will not pursue this matter anymore," Yi Fan said, staring at Chinkong Iha's eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Yi," Chinkong Iha said calmly with a pale face. "You are very lucky to have a good younger brother," Yi Fan looked at Ching Mu Toshi and said as he released Chinkong Iha's wrist. Ching Mu Toshi looked down and did not say a word. Whoosh! After Yi Fan finished speaking, he slowly turned around and disappeared into thin air. Akatsuki, who was holding Baihu in her arms, nodded politely to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, and then used her movement skill, tiptoed on the deck of the ship, and rushed toward Yi Fan's ship. "Take Ikaku-san to my medical cabin immediately, and—" Matsumoto Takeyoshi ordered the stunned ninjas around him, "repair the ship as soon as possible." "Yes." The ninjas came back to their senses, kneeled on one knee, and answered with their heads bowed. "Ching Mu Toshi, please come to my cabin for a moment," Matsumoto Takeyoshi said, and slowly turned around and walked toward the berth cabin. Chapter 694. That's the whole story, Mr. Matsumoto. Inside the warship's cabin, the disheveled green-eyed boy lowered his head and said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Matsumoto Takeyoshi flew into a rage after listening to the green-eyed boy's explanation of the entire incident. "Baka! Ba!" Matsumoto Takeyoshi slammed the wooden table in front of him as he spoke, causing the teacups on the tea tray to rattle. "Hi!" The green-eyed boy lowered his head and said. "Even I have to be courteous to that Yi Fan. You actually dared to provoke him. Are you tired of living?" The enraged Matsumoto Takeyoshi stood up from the futon and walked up to the short green-eyed boy, shouting angrily. The green-eyed boy lowered his head even more. "You can die, but your death has to be worth it. Die on the battlefield. Don't be petty like a woman. Don't fight for fame and fortune over trivial matters. Do you understand?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi questioned green-eyed boy loudly. "Hi!" The green-eyed boy frowned and answered with his head lowered. "In order to save your life, I almost lost one of my generals today." Matsumoto Takeyoshi gritted his teeth and roared at the green-eyed boy. The green-eyed boy lowered his head and was speechless. "Since you spoke the truth, I'll spare you today." Matsumoto Takeyoshi closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He said coldly, "If there's a next time, you know what I'll do." "Thank you, Mr. Matsumoto, for sparing my life." The green-eyed boy, who had cold sweat on his forehead, expressed his gratitude. "Go back and thank your fifth junior brother. If he hadn't arrived in time today and blocked Yi Fan, I'm afraid you would be worshipped by everyone now." Matsumoto Takeyoshi lowered his head and glanced at the green-eyed boy, saying coldly, "He was telling the truth. The green-eyed boy was at fault for today's incident. If it wasn't for Chinkong Iha's timely appearance, even if Green-Eyed Boy didn't die, he would have lost 80% of his life. Not only that, as the leader, Matsumoto Takeyoshi must be fair in his rewards and punishments. He must keep his word and be fair. If Yi Fan held him responsible, he would punish Green-Eyed Child severely even if he was unwilling. Yes, Mr. Matsumoto. The blue-eyed boy wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and lowered his head. Go and heal yourself, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to Green-Eyed Boy as he turned around. Yes, I'll take my leave. The green-eyed boy turned around and walked out of the cabin door. Useless thing, you can't accomplish anything, but you're good at spoiling things. After the green-eyed boy left, the frowning Matsumoto Takeyoshi shook his robe and sat on the futon again, cursing in a low voice. This person is narrow-minded and narrow-minded. He won't be able to take on important tasks in the future. The man in white standing behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. He's so small, how big can his heart be? Matsumoto Takeyoshi scoffed as he picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of tea. I didn't expect Sir to spare him this time, the man in white said. According to Matsumoto Takeyoshi's temper, there was only one ending for people who committed such a crime: death. Do you think that Chinkong Iha's palm was just for Yi Fan to see? Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he picked up the teacup and took a sip. The man in white frowned and seemed to understand something. That palm was for both Yi Fan and me. Matsumoto Takeyoshi put down the teacup and said, Chinkong Iha knows Yi Fan's unruly character, and he also knows my temperament. That's why he seriously injured himself and saved his senior from the two of us. The man in white suddenly understood and nodded slowly. With Chinkong Iha injured, I'm afraid the task assigned to him will have to be changed. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a frown. Who does Sir want to take over this matter? The man in white asked. What do you suggest? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked the man in white. This is not a trivial matter. Among the masters, there are only 4 people who have the ability and are suitable for this task besides Chinkong Iha. The man in white said, Onijiro, Funakoshi Shinichi, Fujita Takashi, and Kamehameha. The 4 of them do have the ability, but they are not the best candidates. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. Not the best candidates? The man in white frowned and asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. This is a serious matter. We have to make sure that nothing goes wrong. If we were to choose from among them, I would need at least 4 of them before I can be at ease, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. But once all of them are sent out, our strength here will be greatly reduced. Hearing Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words, the man in white nodded slowly. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was right. Although there were more than a dozen masters on the warship, most of them were only temporarily resting on the warship. In less than 3 days, at least 4 or 5 masters would have to go out to perform tasks. If the 4 people he mentioned were all sent out, there would only be 3 or 4 masters left on the warship. This number was too small. In addition, Chinkong Iha was seriously injured at this time, the man in green had not recovered his cultivation, and Yi Fan had the exclusive right to go out at any time. If he left, Akatsuki would have to go with him. In that case, the combat power on the warship would be almost gone. Once something happened, even self-protection would be a problem. Then, Master, you mean? The man in white asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Send a message to Sakuragi Haruko and Mochizuki Hisumi, who are on a mission in Yangzhou. Tell them to rush back to the warship within 2 days, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said calmly. In addition, postpone the departure of Sato Kawachi and Yokoyama Yugo for 2 days. Then, the candidates for that task. The man in white asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. No more than 3 people. Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up his teacup and said, but these 3 people must be masters. I think Master must have a suitable candidate, the man in white said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Bamu Chongqing, Kamehameha, and Yi Fan. Matsumoto Takeyoshi took a sip of tea and said the names of the three people. Yi Fan. When the man in white heard Yi Fan's name on the list, he immediately frowned and asked, "Master, you want him to go too? He has now passed the heavenly tribulation, and his strength is not what it used to be. He is famous in the world, and he is the king of the devil world. With him, it is not impossible to defeat the enemy without a fight," Matsumoto Takeyoshi said indifferently as he put down his teacup. "But Master just said that this matter is of great importance, and no mistakes can be made." The man in white frowned and said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, "If we send him, I am worried that this matter will cause problems." "Don't worry, Yamada-kun, I know what to do." Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled mysteriously and said, inside the cabin, the silver-haired, black-robed Yi Fan sat on a futon, frowning and drinking wine. He had originally gone to deal with Ching Mu Boy and demand an explanation for the two ghosts. In the end, Ching Mu Boy was fine, but Chinkong Iha was seriously injured. This made Yi Fan a little vexed, as if he was the one who had hit Chinkong Iha. Akatsuki, who was sitting opposite Yi Fan, held a wine pot and quietly accompanied Yi Fan. From time to time, she would pour wine for Yi Fan. She knew that Yi Fan was unhappy and was drowning his sorrows with wine, so she did not say anything to dissuade Yi Fan. And when a man was drinking, what he hated the most was being disturbed. After drinking 7 or 8 cups of strong wine in a row, Yi Fan suddenly slammed the cup on the table and did not drink any more. "Where are Zhang Gong, Wide?" Yi Fan, who reeked of alcohol, asked in a low voice. Whoosh! The two ghosts Zhang and Wei appeared out of thin air and knelt in front of Yi Fan. The two ghosts had seen the scene on the battleship clearly, and they knew exactly what was going on. The two ghosts never thought that Yi Fan would be so ruthless to that dwarf expert for the two of them. He wanted justice. Ever since they were born, no one had ever stood up for the two of them. Yi Fan's action moved the two ghosts, but they sighed. At this time, the two ghosts' fear of Yi Fan had already turned into respect that came from the bottom of their hearts. If it weren't for the fact that the ghosts' cries were too unpleasant, they would have hugged each other and cried. "Zhang Gong, Wide," Yi Fan said to the two ghosts kneeling in front of him. "The little ghosts are here." The two ghosts answered in unison. "This time, the two of you would rather die than submit. I am very pleased with your loyalty." Yi Fan said to the two ghosts, "In order to show your merit, today I will pass on the two of you the Een Ghost Spirit. With this spirit, the two of you can become ghost heroes. You can go from the netherworld to the underworld, Een and Yang unobstructed. No one will be able to bully you." When the two ghosts heard this, they almost couldn't believe their ears. Go from the netherworld to the underworld, Een and Yang unobstructed, become ghost heroes. For the Een ghosts, these words were more desirable than being reborn as a human. "Thank you, mister, for your kindness." The two ghosts thanked Yi Fan and kowtowed non-stop. "After the two of you obtain this cultivation, you must not bully others and show off in front of others. Otherwise, I will kill you." Yi Fan warned the two ghosts. "We will follow mister's orders." The two ghosts bowed to Yi Fan again and prostrated themselves on the ground. "The two of you come forward. I will pass on the spiritual energy to you and continue your cultivation," Yi Fan said to the two ghosts. "Yes." The two ghosts answered in unison. They knelt in front of Yi Fan and lowered their heads. Yi Fan took out the Een Yang ghost seal that was burning with ghost spirit. When the seal was taken out, it was dazzling and the whole room was filled with light. Yi Fan held the Een Yang ghost seal in his hand and pressed it against Zhang Gong's forehead. Buzz! The moment the ghost seal touched Zhang Gong's forehead, it instantly shone and dazzled everyone's eyes. Countless rays of dazzling black light crazily entered Zhang Gong's forehead from between his eyebrows. Zhang Gong's body was instantly enveloped by a layer of dazzling black light. Spiritual energy rose. After a while, Yi Fan moved the ghost seal away from Zhang Gong's forehead. On Zhang Gong's forehead, there was an ancient seal character een. The bottom of the ghost seal was carved with the 4 ancient seal characters yin yang ghost seal. Yi Fan had imprinted the first word yin on Zhang Gong. At this time, Zhang Gong had obtained the overbearing spiritual energy from the yin yang ghost seal. His spiritual energy had increased tremendously and he had been reborn. Yi Fan smiled and turned the ghost seal around and pressed it against Wide's forehead. The black light appeared again and the spiritual energy rose again. Threads of black light instantly entered Wide's forehead. The ancient seal character Yang appeared on Wide's forehead. Chapter 695. Mister, you have given us a new lease of life. We are willing to do our best and repay you with our lives. Zhang Wei and Zhang Wei cried tears of joy when they saw that their cultivation had skyrocketed and that their new ghost bodies were surrounded by spiritual energy. The 2 ghosts, Yin and Yang, prostrated themselves in front of Yi Fan. Now that the 2 of them had become ghost warriors, they could be said to have been reborn. Their previous bodies of evil ghosts could no longer be compared to them. From now on, the 2 of them would be humans and ghosts if they wanted to be ghosts. They would go from the netherworld to the netherworld, intertwining with yin and yang. They would no longer be afraid of being scorched by the sun. They could be said to be the freest bodies in the world. When they committed evil deeds everywhere, Yi Fan disregarded their former enmity and took them in by his side, teaching them attentively. When they were bullied by others, Yi Fan would directly beat them up without hesitation. When they lacked spirit energy, Yi Fan would directly bestow them with tyrannical ghost spirits, directly raising their cultivation to the ghost mighty realm. Every single one of Yi Fan's actions shook the 2 ghosts' hearts. At this moment, the 2 ghosts had already regarded Yi Fan as their new parent. They were loyal to him. You have already died once. Don't repay me with your lives again, Yi Fan said to the 2 ghosts with a smile. If you die again, you will turn into ashes. Get up. The 2 ghosts wiped their tears and stood up from the ground. After the 2 ghosts got up, Yi Fan nodded with satisfaction. At this moment, the previous yin qi on the 2 ghosts had disappeared without a trace. It seemed that the 2 ghosts had no more resentment in their hearts. Kindness had been born, so there was no more yin qi and resentment. You 2 brothers already have spiritual energy. I will give you a good appearance so that you won't scare the people when you walk in the world in the future, Yi Fan said as he activated the power of the heavenly demon and waved his sleeves at the 2 ghosts standing in front of him. Whoosh! After Yi Fan waved his sleeves, the 2 ghosts suddenly turned around 3 times on the spot, and red light flashed around them. When the red light dissipated, the 2 ghosts who stopped moving were dumbfounded. They were completely shocked by the other party's appearance. At this time, Zhang Gong was wearing a white jade robe with an emerald belt around his waist. His face was refined, his appearance was dignified, and his figure was slender. He exuded a scholarly aura, just like a scholar who had read a lot of books. He no longer had the slanted eyes, curved eyebrows, sharp mouth, and monkey cheeks from before. Then, he looked at Wide. He was wearing a green jade robe with a white jade belt around his waist. His face was handsome and his figure was tall and straight. He looked like a valiant bouffon. He was extremely majestic, like a general who was about to go to war. He no longer looked like the burly man with a leopard head and round eyes. When the 2 ghosts saw this, they were overjoyed. They looked at each other and touched each other like children. You look much better than before, Yi Fan said with a smile as he looked at the 2 new ghosts. Thank you for your kindness. The 2 ghosts expressed their gratitude and knelt on the ground again to kowtow to Yi Fan. This is just a smokescreen. It is not your real appearance, Yi Fan said to the 2 ghosts kneeling in front of him. As the saying goes, one's appearance is born from one's heart. As long as you turn over a new leaf and accumulate merits, your appearance will naturally change. From today onwards, you 2 brothers will recite the Tao Te Ching 3 times a day and recite the Heart Sutra 108 times. Sincerely repent for the sins of killing in the past. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. The two ghosts said in unison. When I don't need you to do anything, you will attach yourself to this yin-yang ghost seal. Repent for your sins, cultivate yin and refine spirit. Do not slack off, Yifan said. Yes, sir, the two ghosts replied. Come in. Yifan held the yin-yang ghost seal in his hand and said, If there's anything, I'll inform you. The two ghosts respectfully kowtowed to Yifan 3 times. Then, they turned into 2 dazzling black lights and flew into the yin-yang ghost seal in Yifan's hand. Whoosh! Just as Yifan put away the yin-yang ghost seal, the sound of a figure landing outside the door came from outside. Yifan had already recognized the person from his aura and footwork. This person was the ninja, who was proficient in Chinese and was in charge of supplying supplies to Yifan's small boat, Ishi. Knock, 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 Ishi gently knocked on the door. What is it? Yifan asked calmly. Mr. Yi, Mr. Matsumoto invites you over. Ishi's voice came from outside the cabin. Got it, Yifan replied with a frown. Yes, Ishi will take his leave. Ishi said respectfully outside the cabin. He tapped the deck with the tip of his foot and flew toward the warship. Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked you over at this time. Could it be because of what happened just now? Akatsuki frowned and asked Yifan. She had her reasons for thinking so. She and Yifan were partners. If Matsumoto Takeyoshi had a new mission, it was impossible for him not to inform her. Who cares? We'll know when we get there. Yifan stood up from the futon and said, You and Xiao Zhao stay here. I'll be right back. Okay. Akatsuki nodded in response. Yifan put on his shoes and instantly disappeared from where he was standing. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yifan's figure appeared at the bow of the warship once again. On the deck in the distance, more than a dozen ninjas were using molten iron to cast the cracks caused by the blue-eyed boy's blade energy. Chi, the hot red molten iron poured into the more than 3 feet long crack, making a sizzling sound and emitting smoke. Yifan walked toward Matsumoto Takeyoshi's cabin with his hands behind his back. Yi. Mr. Yi. A sharp-eyed ninja saw Yifan and immediately put down the tools in his hand and respectfully bowed to Yifan. Mr. Yi, the ninjas stopped their work and saluted Yifan. You do what you need to do. There's no need to be so polite. Yifan said faintly and floated past without stopping. When they passed by the green-eyed boy's cabin, Yifan glanced sideways at him. At this time, the broken and distorted cabin door has been carried away, and several ninjas were installing a new cabin door for Aimu Datoshi. The disheveled blue-eyed boy was sitting cross-legged on the wooden couch, healing his injuries. Greetings, Mr. Yi. After seeing Yifan, the ninjas installing the cabin door bowed to Yifan. After the blue-eyed boy heard the voice, he opened his eyes and looked at Yifan. His eyes were burning with anger, but he was ashamed and angry. Make the blue-eyed boy's cabin door sturdier and add a few more layers of steel plates. Otherwise, the blue-eyed boy won't be able to sleep well. Yifan looked at the blue-eyed boy with a sneer and said to the ninjas, Yes. The ninjas stood there with embarrassed expressions and bowed their heads. Even a fool could tell that Yifan was mocking the blue-eyed boy. The blue-eyed boy was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. His face was pale and his fists were clenched so tightly that they made cracking sounds. Humph, Yifan sneered and walked away. Bah! J. The blue-eyed boy squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. Yifan soon arrived outside Matsumoto Takeyoshi's cabin door. Seeing Yifan coming, the 2 gatekeepers bowed to Yifan respectfully and reached out to slide the cabin door open. Yifan took a step forward and entered. Inside the spacious and comfortable cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi was sitting on a futon with a smile on his face, drinking tea quietly. The man in white stood behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi with his eyes closed and a calm expression. On both sides of Matsumoto Takeyoshi, there were 3 exquisite wooden tables. On the wooden tables, there were a few dishes and a pot of sake. There were already people sitting on the inside of 2 of the wooden tables. Bamu Chongqing, who was tall and handsome in a white ninja suit, and Kamehameha, who was wearing a gray robe, looked old and wrinkled. Seeing the 2 of them, Yi Fan, who was bending over to enter the cabin, frowned. It seemed that Matsumoto Takeyoshi was not looking for him alone. Voila! The cabin door behind Yi Fan slowly closed. Bufan-kun, come, please sit, we've been waiting for you. Matsumoto Takeyoshi saw Yi Fan come in and quickly invited Yi Fan to take a seat. Yi Fan did not stand on ceremony and went directly to the empty wooden table. He shook his robe and sat down. He glanced at Bamu Chongqing, who was sitting not far from him, and then looked at Kamehameha, who was sitting opposite him. The 2 of them nodded slightly to him as a greeting. Yi Fan nodded back. I invited the 3 of you here today because I have an important task for the 3 of you. Matsumoto Takeyoshi went straight to the point and said, because this matter is of great importance. Matsumoto thought about it and felt that this matter should be handled by the 3 of you personally. Therefore, I set up a banquet and invited the 3 of you to discuss it. As soon as Matsumoto Takeyoshi said this, Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha's expressions suddenly became serious. What was so important that it required the 3 of them to work together to complete it? And among the 3 of them, there was even Yi Fan, who had a heaven-defying cultivation base. Yi Fan was also shocked after hearing this. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha were the top experts among the experts. They were extremely strong. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had teamed him up with the 2 of them. There must be something extremely important to do. If he guessed correctly, the mission this time must be extremely dangerous. They might even have to fight with experts. The 3 of them seemed to be unrelated, but there was actually a story behind it. Bamu Chongqing was the sect master of Japan's Koga-ryu. His saber skills were superb, and his ninjutsu was the best in Japan. Kamehameha was a senior figure in the Japanese martial arts world. Needless to say, his saber skills were unparalleled, and his 5 elements spell was unparalleled. Once the 3 of them formed a team, they would have saber skills, ninjutsu, 5 elements spell, and spirit chi. What kind of mission could make Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was always full of confidence, so cautious? Yi Fan was shocked. Kamehameha stroked his long beard. His eyes were bright as he carefully tried to figure out Matsumoto Takeyoshi's intentions. The 3 of them were originally partnered with someone else. Yi Fan's partner was Akatsuki, Bamu Chongqing's partner was Onijiro, and his partner was Yokoyama Yugo. Now that Matsumoto Takeyoshi had temporarily formed the 3 of them to carry out a mission together, they must have encountered something difficult. Otherwise, they would definitely not be so cautious. Mr. Matsumoto, what kind of mission is so important that the 3 of us have to work together? Bamu Chongqing, who was as white as snow, asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. It's very simple, a meteorite. Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who had a smile on his face, picked up his teacup, took a sip of tea, and spat out 2 words from his mouth. Meteorite. Another meteorite. Yi Fan was secretly shocked. 5 days later, a fire meteor will fall from the sky. The landing site will be in the South China Sea. Matsumoto Takeyoshi put down the teacup in his hand and said, I want the 3 of you to bring that meteorite back in one piece. Chapter 696. A new mission? The 3 of you are going together? Inside the cabin, Yu Hongji's beautiful eyes widened in shock after hearing Yi Fan's story. She asked in shock. She had never thought that Matsumoto Takeyoshi would summon Yi Fan to go with him this time to arrange a new mission. Moreover, he had even mobilized top experts like Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha. Yi Fan held the hot tea in his hand and nodded with a dignified expression. What kind of mission would make Matsumoto Takeyoshi mobilize so many people? Akatsuki frowned and asked Yi Fan. Ever since the 13 experts had come to the Great Ming Dynasty, Matsumoto Takeyoshi had never arranged for more than 3 experts to go out and carry out the same mission. But this time, Matsumoto Takeyoshi had unexpectedly mobilized 3 peerless experts, including Yi Fan, to form a top team and go out to carry out a mission. Something that could make Matsumoto Takeyoshi so cautious was definitely not an ordinary matter. Meteoric iron. Yi Fan frowned and put down the teacup in his hand. He said, Matsumoto Takeyoshi wants the 3 of us to go out and look for a piece of meteoric iron. Meteoric iron? Akatsuki frowned and asked. Yi Fan nodded. In order to find a piece of meteoric iron, he actually sent the 3 of you? Akatsuki asked with a puzzled expression. Isn't this a bit of a fuss? Matsumoto Takeyoshi's search for meteoric iron was no secret among the experts. Several groups of experts had already found a large amount of meteoric iron. In Akatsuki's opinion, finding meteoric iron was not difficult at all. Matsumoto Takeyoshi did not need to mobilize so many people. This meteoric iron is different from other meteoric iron. Yi Fan looked up at Akatsuki and said, strictly speaking, this meteoric iron can't be called a meteoric iron, but a fire meteor. A fire meteor? Akatsuki asked. That's right. The reason why it can't be called a meteoric iron is because it is still in the sky. Yi Fan picked up his teacup and took a sip. When Akatsuki heard Yi Fan's words, her expression changed. A meteoric iron in the sky, wasn't it a star? Matsumoto Takeyoshi received news. Yi Fan continued. 5 days later, this fire meteor will fall from the sky in the South China Sea. The mission of the 3 of us is to bring back this falling meteor. Since Matsumoto Takeyoshi already knows where this fire meteor will fall, why didn't he just send ninjas to guard it and retrieve it after it falls? Instead, he sent the 3 of you together? Akatsuki asked. You're thinking too simply. Yi Fan shook his head and said, this fire meteor is not comparable to other meteoric iron. You have to know that this meteoric iron is a part of the jinx. Rumor has it that if this meteoric iron doesn't appear, there will be war and natural disasters. It is extremely ominous. Extremely ominous? Then why did Matsumoto Takeyoshi go through so much trouble to get this meteoric iron? Akatsuki asked, puzzled. It is because this meteoric iron is extremely ominous. It contains the murderous aura of heaven and earth. That's why Matsumoto Takeyoshi covets this meteoric iron. He wants to use it to forge a magical weapon and equip the Black Feather Army, Yi Fan said with a serious face. Oh my God! Akatsuki muttered to herself, her gaze fixed. If the Black Feather Army was equipped with such a magical weapon, their combat power would be so strong that even the Bronze Men army would find it difficult to resist. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was indeed insightful. He actually came up with such a brilliant plan. According to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, this fire meteor is extremely heavy. It weighs at least tens of thousands of kilograms. After it falls into the South Sea, it will definitely cause a tsunami, Yi Fan said as he picked up the teapot to refill his tea. We have to take this meteoric iron out before it sinks to the bottom of the sea and bring it back to the East Sea. Yi Fan's casual words sounded incredible to Akatsuki. She could not imagine how grand that scene would be. She knew very well how strong the impact of a meteoric iron was. In Dongying, she had seen with her own eyes the huge crater created by the impact of a meteoric iron. It was just a meteoric iron the size of a basket, but it had created a huge crater that was dozens of feet deep and dozens of feet wide. A small meteoric iron was already like this. If it weighed tens of thousands of kilograms, the destructive power it would cause was simply unimaginable. This is not the most troublesome part. Yi Fan put down the teapot and continued, you have to know that Matsumoto Takeyoshi is not the only one who covets this meteoric iron. I heard that all the forces have sent a large number of experts this time. Not only the countries in the South Sea, I heard that even Europe and Russia have secretly sent experts to the South Sea to seize this meteoric iron. This matter is not easy to handle. As Yi Fan spoke, he picked up the teacup and took a sip. I'll talk to Matsumoto Takeyoshi and ask him to send me with you. Seeing that Yi Fan's mission was fraught with danger, Akatsuki immediately proposed to go with Yi Fan. Do you think Matsumoto Takeyoshi will agree to let you go? Yi Fan looked up and asked Akatsuki as he drank his tea. Akatsuki pursed her lips and remained silent. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's manpower is already a little stretched. Otherwise, he would definitely not only send the three of us, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki. If you can go, Matsumoto Takeyoshi would have already informed you. Having said that, even if you can go, I won't let you go. Why? Akatsuki looked up at Yi Fan, her beautiful eyes full of hope. This mission is very dangerous. It is very likely that there will be a fierce battle, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki. If you go, you will be in danger. I know that my cultivation is not as good as yours. Akatsuki lowered her head and whispered, If I follow you, I will become a burden to you. You and I have been together for a long time. When have I ever seen you as a burden, En? Yi Fan looked at the silent Akatsuki and asked with a smile. Akatsuki looked up at Yi Fan, pursed her lips, and did not speak. For a long time, she and Yi Fan were inseparable. Now that Yi Fan had formed a partnership with someone else, she felt a little lost in her heart. This trip is different from usual. You stay in the East China Sea and I can also relax. Otherwise, I will be worried about you, understand? Yi Fan said softly to Akatsuki. Akatsuki's heart warmed and she nodded obediently. Xiao Zhao, you can't go this time either. Stay on this boat with Hong Ji and wait for me to come back, Yi Fan said to Baihu in Akatsuki's arms. After Baihu heard this, she reluctantly nodded. Akatsuki's cultivation was not enough to help, let alone her fox body. I will leave this yin-yang ghost seal with you for the time being, Yi Fan said as he took out the seal and handed it to Akatsuki. Why is this? Akatsuki looked up at Yi Fan and asked in confusion. After I leave, there will only be you and Xiao Zhao on this boat. I am a little worried, Yi Fan said. With the fire Kirin and yin-yang ghosts on this seal protecting you, I feel more at ease, Yi Fan said as he stuffed the seal into Akatsuki's hand. Looking at the yin-yang ghost seal in her hand, Akatsuki's heart suddenly flowed with warmth. Yi Fan still cared about her. The power of this seal is amazing. It is better to keep it with you. It can help you deal with enemies, Akatsuki said as she handed the seal to Yi Fan and said, I am very safe on the East China Sea. I don't need anyone to protect me. That blue-eyed boy had the audacity to bully the two ghosts when I wasn't around. Once I'm gone, someone else might try to bully you. Yi Fan pushed the treasure seal towards her and said, With this in your hands, no one will be able to touch you. You are too cautious. Akatsuki blushed and smiled. Who would be so bold? Sato Kawachi and that Chi Yao are both lechers, Yi Fan said. Both of them have evil arts. With your current cultivation, you are no match for them. Especially that Chi Yao. His evil arts are so strong that even I don't dare to underestimate him, let alone you. This yin-yang ghost seal can absorb yin spirit. With the fire Kirin and the two ghosts guarding it, they won't dare to do anything to you. Okay, I will listen to you, Akatsuki said with a red face. Yi Fan's words made her feel like he was talking to his beloved woman, which made her very happy. Yi Fan smiled and patted Akatsuki on the shoulder. When are you leaving? Akatsuki asked Yi Fan. Tomorrow, Yi Fan replied. Tomorrow? Akatsuki asked. Didn't you say in 5 days? The fire meteor will indeed fall in 5 days, Yi Fan explained. But we have to go there in advance to check the terrain and understand the distribution of other forces so that we can be on the safe side. Are you really going to help Matsumoto Takeyoshi get this fire meteor? Akatsuki asked Yifan. It depends, Yifan said. If there is a chance, I will destroy it. But this time, Kamehameha will accompany me. I am afraid it will be difficult to get it. Then what should we do? Akatsuki asked with a frown. We can only act according to the circumstances, Yifan said with a solemn expression. Matsumoto Takeyoshi is really amazing. He can even get news of this in advance. Inside the cabin, Onijiro, who was dressed in a black robe, frowned slightly and said to Bamuchangqing, who was sitting opposite him. I am a little puzzled, Bamuchangqing said with a frown. Why did Matsumoto Takeyoshi send me and not you? Matsumoto Takeyoshi is extremely suspicious, and this matter is of great importance. Naturally, we cannot let our guard down, Onijiro said to Bamuchangqing. To be on the safe side, Matsumoto Takeyoshi separated the three groups of partners. This is the best plan. There is nothing strange about it. Sigh, this is really a tough job, Bamuchangqing said as he picked up his wine glass and drank the sake in one gulp. Onijiro smiled as he poured himself a full glass of sake and asked Bamuchangqing, What, are you afraid that you don't have enough people, or that you are not a match for them? I am not worried about anything else, Bamuchangqing said to Onijiro with a frown. I am only worried about Yifan. Worried about Yifan? Haha, Onijiro laughed. Why are you worried about him? His cultivation level is not to be trifled with. It is easy for you to say that, Bamuchangqing said. You know better than anyone what I mean. Chapter 697. You're still in the mood to laugh at a time like this? Bamuchangqing asked with a frown when he saw that Onijiro was only smiling without saying anything. Are you worried that Yifan will destroy this meteorite? Onijiro put down his wine glass and asked Bamuchangqing with a smile. I think there's a high chance that he will do that, Bamuchangqing said with a troubled expression. Matsumoto Takeyoshi used a high-quality saber made of meteorite to equip the Black Feather Army with the purpose of dealing with the Great Ming Dynasty's imperial court one day. As a citizen of the Great Ming Dynasty, Yifan will definitely not ignore this matter. If he really wants to help the Great Ming Dynasty's imperial court, he will definitely think of a way to destroy this item. At that time, what should I do? Help Yifan destroy this item? Or meet him on the battlefield and stop him from doing so? One is a friend and the other is a benefactor. I really don't know how to choose. Benefactor? Onijiro asked Bamuchangqing with a smile. Why, do you owe Matsumoto Takeyoshi a favor? Back then, our Koga Ryu and the Japanese One-Blade Ryu had a grudge, Bamuchangqing said to Onijiro. At that time, one of my disciples and 3 disciples of One-Blade Ryu were drinking in a tavern at the same time. Because they didn't like each other, they used some trivial matters to fight. They even drew their sabers. My disciple was young and vigorous, and his saber skills were not bad. In addition, he drank a lot of wine. In a fit of anger, he cut off the right hands of the 3 disciples of One-Blade Ryu and seriously injured them. Later, I found out that among the 3 people who were seriously injured, one of them was the only son of an important minister in the Japanese imperial court. He was also the beloved disciple of the One-Blade Ryu's sect master. Oh, your disciple is not bad, Onijiro said with a smile as he drank his wine. 1 against 3. Don't make sarcastic remarks. Bamuchangqing rolled his eyes at Onijiro and continued. At that time, One-Blade Ryu was extremely powerful because of the support of the imperial court's ministers. After this incident, One-Blade Ryu gathered a large number of masters to block the door and threatened to pay with blood and destroy our Koga Ryu. In addition, the important minister also sent a large number of samurai to take revenge because his beloved son was seriously injured. Including the masters of One-Blade Ryu, there were more than 500 people. I have heard a little about this matter, but I heard that it was left unsettled, Anamuki Lang said as he poured wine for Yagi Zhongqing. At that time, I had just become the leader of the Koga clan. I was young and full of vigor. How could I bear such a petty insult? So I rushed out with 300 disciples, ready to kill all of them, Yagi Zhongqing said calmly. He picked up the wine cup and drank it. Although Bamu Chongqing said it very calmly, Onijiro could faintly hear a strong murderous intent in his tone. I really didn't expect Brother Yagi to be a ruthless person who killed without batting an eye. Onijiro continued to pour wine for Bamu Chongqing and said with a smile. When I was about to kill with my disciples, Matsumoto Takeyoshi arrived with more than a dozen attendants and came forward to help Koga Ryu, Bamu Chongqing said to Onijiro. This Matsumoto Takeyoshi is quite brave. He only brought a dozen attendants and dared to challenge One-Blade Ryu, Onijiro said with a smile. Brother Onijiro, guess who those attendants are? Bamu Chongqing looked up at Onijiro and asked. Who are they? Onijiro picked up his wineglass and was about to drink. Everyone has a black feather on their chest. Who else can they be? Bamu Chongqing asked. Black feather ninja? Onijiro's wineglass stopped in front of his mouth. Yes, black feather ninja, Bamu Chongqing said calmly. No wonder this matter was left unsettled. So it was like this. Onijiro took a sip of wine. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was also one of the important ministers of the imperial court at that time, and he was deeply favored by Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was Tokugawa Ieyasu's favorite person. In addition, he had Black Feather Ninja in his hands. Even if One-Blade Ryu and that important minister were stupid, they would have to think twice. My disciple's life was saved, and I also owe Matsumoto Takeyoshi a favor. Sigh. Bamu Chongqing said, sighed, and drank. The reason Matsumoto Takeyoshi chose you to carry out this mission is probably because of this matter. Onijiro put down his wineglass and said. That's why I'm worried, Bamu Chongqing said. You and I both know that Yi Fan is a righteous person. Among all the masters, other than you, Brother Onijiro, the only one who can be called Bamu Chongqing's friend is him. In my opinion, this matter is both difficult and simple at the same time, Mr. Kimi said as he looked at Yagi Long Kiyoshi with a smirk. Oh? What good plan does Brother Onijiro have? Bamu Chongqing asked Onijiro. You can do this. Onijiro moved his head close to Bamu Chongqing's ear and whispered a few words. After Bamu Chongqing heard this, his eyes widened, cough cough cough. Inside the sleeping cabin, the blue-eyed boy sat in front of the wooden table with his clothes wide open. He drank alone and coughed from time to time. Yi Fan's kick was very powerful. The blue-eyed boy had been healing for 4 hours, but he still didn't get much better. At this time, he was depressed to the extreme and could only drown his sorrows in alcohol. His skills were inferior and he was played by Yi Fan in front of all the masters. In order to save him, 5th junior brother Chinkong Iha injured himself and was seriously injured. Not only that, he was also scolded by Matsumoto Takeyoshi and almost lost his life. He was even ridiculed by Yi Fan in front of the ninjas. He really forgot to look at the almanac today. Unlucky things happened one after another. Baka! The more the blue-eyed boy thought about it, the angrier he got. He cursed in his heart and slammed the wine cup on the ground. Bah! The wine cup was smashed into pieces and the porcelain shards flew everywhere. Knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Who is it? The blue-eyed boy asked angrily in a loud voice. Crash! The newly installed heavy cabin door was opened from the outside and a man stepped in from outside the cabin. Baka! The blue-eyed boy was full of anger and turned his head to look at the cabin door. Who was so rude to enter without his permission? The man was in blue and had a smile on his face. It was none other than the man in blue, Sato Kawakai. The blue-eyed boy turned his head away when he saw that it was Sato Kawakai. He took another empty cup from the tea tray and continued to drink. Brother Green-Eyed, Don't you find it boring to drink alone? After closing the cabin door, Sado Kai took off his clogs and sat in front of the blue-eyed boy with a smile on his face. What are you doing here? The blue-eyed boy asked Sado Kai in a disdainful tone while drinking. I'm here to take a look at Brother Ching Mu's injuries, and bring some tonics for him to recuperate, Sado Kai said as he took out a long box from his arms. He opened it and put it on the table in front of the blue-eyed boy. In the wooden box there was a ginseng in the shape of a human. The blue-eyed boy glanced at the ginseng in the wooden box and said to Sado Kai, I, green-eyed boy, am not as good as you. I'm so embarrassed. Everyone is avoiding me. Why are you here, Mr. Sado? Brother Green-eyed, what are you talking about? I, Sado Kai, may not be a gentleman, but I'm not one to kick a man when he's down, Sado Kai said as he took out a wine cup from the wooden table and filled it with wine. The blue-eyed boy looked up at Sado Kai and drank quietly without saying a word. Listen to my advice. Brother Green-eyed, you don't have to take what happened today to heart. Sado Kai put down the wine pot and said, There's an old saying in the Central Plains, victory and defeat are commonplace. Brother Green-eyed, you just lost today, but it doesn't mean you'll lose in the future. As the saying goes, war is unpredictable. With your cultivation, it's not impossible to turn defeat into victory in the future. Sado Kai said as he picked up the wine cup and drank it. Mr. Sado, you're so funny. The blue-eyed boy looked at Sado Kai with a pair of blue eyes and said, Everyone saw how badly I lost today. Mr. Sado even said that I'll turn defeat into victory in the future. Are you making fun of me? Ha ha ha. Sado Kai put down the wine cup and laughed loudly. Why are you laughing, Brother Sado? The blue-eyed boy asked coldly. Brother Green-eyed, you can hide it from others, but you can't hide it from me. Sado Kai stopped laughing, leaned forward, and said to the blue-eyed boy, If I'm not wrong, Brother Green-eyed, you didn't try your best in today's battle. The blue-eyed boy stopped with the wine cup in his hand at the corner of his mouth. His blue eyes flashed, and he suddenly looked at Sado Kai with eyes as sharp as knives. Brother Green-eyed, am I right? Sado Kai asked with a smile as he picked up the wine pot and poured wine for himself. How do you know, Mr. Sado? The blue-eyed boy asked as he regained his composure. Brother Green-eyed and my cultivation method are very similar. We're both good at combining special techniques and sword techniques. Sado Kai put down the wine pot and said with a smile, Brother Green-eyed, although you seem to have lost today's battle, you still have 70% of your spiritual chi. You haven't unsheathed your secret treasure, the Black Wind Sword, and you haven't used your secret technique, the 4-yin formation. You can see the whole picture just by looking at one spot. In my opinion, you're either hiding your strength or you don't dare to use your full strength. Mr. Sado, you know me very well, the blue-eyed boy said in a strange tone as he narrowed his eyes at Sado Kai. Sado Kai was right. He didn't use his full strength in today's battle. It wasn't that he was conceited, but before they came to the great Ming dynasty, the Dongying Ghost King specially told the 5 of them not to use the forbidden technique unless it was absolutely necessary. They couldn't use the forbidden technique to cause trouble and show off in front of others. Otherwise, their cultivation would be destroyed and they would be expelled from the sect. What happened today was that he provoked Yi Fan, which was why he was humiliated. If he used the forbidden technique because of that, he would be disobeying his master's order. Of course, that was only one of the reasons. The blue-eyed boy would rather die than use the forbidden technique. Besides disobeying his master's order, there was another reason why he didn't use the forbidden technique. That was because he had personally experienced Yi Fan's true strength. From his point of view, even if he were to use his forbidden technique, he would only be able to last 3 moves against Yi Fan with his current spiritual energy cultivation base. If he was going to die anyway, he might as well die with dignity. Even if he had to die, he couldn't disobey his master's order. He didn't expect Satokawa Kai to be so insightful that he could see that. Brother Green-Eyed, you're exaggerating, Satokawa Kai said with a smile. I'm not afraid that you'll laugh at me. I've fought with that Yi guy before. My defeat was much worse than yours. Chapter 698. The next morning, at dawn. On the warship, there were 3 people standing side by side. The 3 of them were Yagi Long Kiyoshi, who was tall and handsome, had a saber on his back, and was dressed in a pure white ninja uniform. Mizuki Kizuru, who was dressed in a gray robe and had a wooden staff in his hand. Lastly, Yi Fan, who had silver hair and a golden crown, was dressed in a black robe, and was standing with his hands behind his back. The 3 of them stood side by side at the bow of the ship, facing the sea. The sea breeze blew against their faces, causing their robes to flutter in the wind. The rolling waves hit the side of the warship, making the sound of water splashing. It's almost time we should set off. Bamu Chongqing, who was wearing a snow-white robe, looked at the star in Yi Kong's hand and took the lead to break the silence and said, 4 hours later, we'll meet at Fiend Island. The white-haired wooden turtle crane said with a smile. Do you need me to give you a ride? Yi Fan, whose silver hair was fluttering, turned his head to look at the 2 and asked. With his current movement technique, it would take at most 10 minutes to reach the South Sea, which was thousands of miles away. The reason why he said this was not to show off his cultivation, but to save time. There's no need for that, the wooden turtle said with a smile. This old man is already old. My old bones can no longer withstand the torment. This old man appreciates Mr. Ye's good intentions. Brother Bamu, what about you? Yi Fan asked Bamu Chongqing. Brother Bufan, you don't have to be so polite. This water route is nothing to me. Bamu Chongqing said to Yi Fan with a smile. If you reach Demon Island first, you can light a bonfire on the island and release the smoke. After Mr. Kamehameha and I see the smoke, we will meet up with you. Okay. Yi Fan nodded and said. In that case, I'll go first. Kamehameha said and threw the wooden staff in his hand into the air. Shwa, that 5-feet-long brown wooden staff instantly floated horizontally in the air more than 10 feet above the sea surface, motionless. Kamehameha smiled and tapped the deck of the warship with the tip of his foot. In an instant, he leaped into the air and landed on the wooden staff. See you at Demon Island. Kamehameha stood on the wooden staff as he spoke to the 2 people on the deck. He urged the wooden staff beneath his feet, and with a swoosh, he flew rapidly in the direction of the South China Sea. His speed was so fast that it could be called a gust of wind. Brother Bufan, I'll see you in a while. Bamu Chongqing said to Yi Fan as he also stood up. Whoosh then, he leaped off the battleship and landed on the surface of the turbulent sea. Phew, when the rapidly descending Bamu Chongqing was less than half a foot from the surface of the sea, his body suddenly stopped. While floating on the sea surface, he placed his hands behind his back and leaned forward slightly, preparing to charge forward. Lin Bing Doja, all in formation, advance. Bamu Chongqing recited the 9 syllables mantra. Once the 9 syllables mantra was recited, a layer of dazzling white light immediately appeared around Bamu Chongqing's body. Boom! A huge wave of chi gushed out from Yagi Long Kiyoshi's feet, and a huge white ripple appeared on the surface of the sea, spreading out at an extremely fast speed. Whoosh! Bamu Chongqing's body rushed forward like an arrow released from a bow. His speed was so fast that the airflow created by Bamu Chongqing's body split open a 3-feet-wide water path. Bamu Chongqing's white clothes fluttered as he rode the wind and broke the waves, disappearing without a trace in an instant. These 2 people really live up to their reputation. I can see a thing or two from their body movements. Yi Fan thought in his heart and flicked his sleeves. Phew! A large mass of pure white clouds instantly condensed under Yi Fan's feet and slowly lifted Yi Fan up into the sky. One was surrounded by clouds, one was surrounded by wind, and one was split open by wave. The three experts displayed their abilities and quickly moved forward in the clouds, in the air, and on the sea surface. Among the three of them, Yi Fan was the one with the fastest speed. Without using his spirit chi and cultivation base, Yi Fan used less than 2 hours to arrive at the sky above the South China Sea by using the cloud traversing technique. After arriving in the sky, Yi Fan used the cloud stopping technique to stop the auspicious cloud. He shaded his eyes with his hand and looked down. On the vast blue sea surface, dozens of large and small islands were embedded on the surface of the sea like a chain of pearls. It was a spectacular sight. On these islands there were towering trees, and it was full of vitality. Yi Fan was not in the mood to appreciate the beautiful scenery in front of him. He used his eyes to carefully search for the location of Demon Island. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had told the three of them before that Demon Island was like its name. The island was rugged with strange rocks and dense with thorns. It was said that there were ferocious beasts roaming around. In addition, on the two ends of the island, there were 2 active volcanoes that frequently erupted. It was said that this island's original name was Volcano Island. Later, because countless sailors mysteriously disappeared on this island, it was named Demon Island by the sailors of various countries. It was said that if this island was looked down from the sky, it would look like a demon with 2 horns on its head. The reason why Matsumoto Takeyoshi let Yi Fan and the other 2 come to Demon Island was not because of how mysterious and terrifying this island was, but because this island was the highest above sea level among all the islands in the South Sea. It was 3 times higher than the other islands. As long as they occupied this island, they could overlook the situation of the other islands. They could also observe the falling meteors at the first moment. Yi Fan's eyesight was very strong. In less than 10 minutes, he found the mysterious and gloomy island that was famous overseas. It was Demon Island. To be honest, when Yi Fan saw this island for the first time, he was really shocked. This mysterious island was really like the rumors said. When one looked down, it looked completely like a demon. 2 tall, sharp, and crooked mountain peaks stood on both sides of the island. They were like 2 huge horns. A bumpy gravel was in the center of the island. It formed a triangular shape, and it looked like a demon's hooked nose. A long and narrow valley was at the edge of the island. The valley was full of rugged rocks that intersected with each other, and they looked like dense teeth. In addition to the lip-shaped valley, it was completely like a demon's huge mouth with sharp teeth sticking out. What was even more inconceivable was that the 2 active volcanoes were on the left and right of the demon's hooked nose. They were like 2 huge black holes. What a good demon island! It really deserves its reputation, Yi Fan thought in his heart. Then, he urged the auspicious clouds and slowly descended toward the Demon Island. For some unknown reason, the closer he got to the Demon Island, the more uncomfortable Yi Fan felt. But he couldn't tell the specific reason. Maybe it's because this island's shape is too lifelike. Yi Fan thought in his heart as he descended. Yi Fan dispelled the auspicious clouds when he was 100 feet away from the island's surface. Then, he landed on the beach at the edge of the island. The beach was covered with fine sand. It was very soft and comfortable to walk on. The waves surged up the beach layer by layer. Then, they receded layer by layer. They emitted a soft rustling sound. It was very quiet. At this moment, the sky was already bright. Above the sea, a red sun spurted out and illuminated the beach with golden light. It was very beautiful. After he landed, Yi Fan didn't appreciate the rare beautiful scenery in front of him. Instead, he turned around and faced the Demon Island. He closed his eyes and mobilized all the senses in his body. He carefully sensed the island. Since he was going to spend the night here in these 5 days, he must first explore this island to ensure his safety. */ As soon as Yi Fan released his 5 senses, a flock of strange birds flew up from the dense forest not far away. They screamed and flew into the sky. Now that he had passed the heavenly tribulation, his cultivation level was close to that of an immortal. His body already had the power of heavenly thunder. His arrival would naturally cause some creatures on the demon island to be nervous. Yi Fan closed his eyes tightly. He didn't care about the strange birds. He continued to explore the island. After a while, Yi Fan opened his eyes and frowned slightly. After a thorough exploration, he found some unusual situations. The Qi on this island was very heavy. In the Qi, there seemed to be a pair of eyes staring at him fiercely. It seemed that there was a dark force hidden on this island. This force was so strong that even he couldn't see what kind of monster it was. In addition, there were many kinds of birds and beasts on the island. Most of these creatures were bloodthirsty, evil creatures. Some of them had even become powerful. In the depths of the dense forest on the island, there were hundreds of spirits and ghosts wandering around. Most of these ghosts were wearing crew costumes. There were men and women, old and young. At first glance, one could tell that they were the crew members of various countries who had died on this demon island. They wandered aimlessly in the dense forest. Their expressions were dull, and they looked extremely creepy. This demon island is really a place of extreme Qi and evil spirits. Yi Fan, who was frowning, thought to himself. It was a pity that the Yang ghost seal wasn't with him now. Otherwise, he could take these ghosts into the seal and take them away from this place. He wouldn't have to suffer the pain of wandering around here. Rumble, as Yi Fan was thinking, the ground of the island suddenly began to shake violently. Rumble. Rumble. Two loud sounds came from the other side of the island. Yi Fan looked up and his frown deepened. He saw two plumes of thick black smoke rising from the two volcanoes in the distance. They went straight up into the sky. At the same time, an extremely evil and overbearing spiritual pressure appeared out of thin air. It surged toward Yi Fan from all directions. Seeing this, Yi Fan was instantly enraged. He opened his eyes wide and mobilized 30% of the overbearing spiritual power of the Phoenix Dance Ninth Heaven, which instantly came out of his body. Rumble. Yi Fan's silver hair flew up into the sky. A seven-colored light appeared out of thin air and shot out rapidly. Whoosh! The powerful spiritual pressure that had appeared just now was instantly suppressed by Yi Fan's overbearing spiritual pressure. Rumble. The ground gradually calmed down. The black smoke rising from the volcanoes in the distance also dissipated instantly. It returned to normal. You'd better not provoke me. Otherwise, I'll raze this demon island to the ground. Yi Fan, whose silver hair fell slowly, said calmly to the void. The extremely evil spiritual pressure lingered in the dense forest not far from Yi Fan. It seemed to be judging Yi Fan's words. Seeing that the other party didn't seem to believe him, Yi Fan's lips curled up. He stretched out his right hand toward the void and made a move in his mind. Buzz, as countless black lights shot out from Yi Fan's hand, a long black saber with flowing light appeared in Yi Fan's hand out of thin air. The saber was 4 feet and 4 inches long and 3 inches wide. It was as black as ink and was surrounded by demonic spirits. On both sides of the saber's scabbard, there were 4 patterns of demons, and monsters. They were vivid and lifelike. At the top of the saber's scabbard, there was a ferocious, roaring black skull embedded in it. On top of the skull, there was a bright red word swastika, written upside down on it. The demon lord's divine weapon, Blood Drinker, had appeared. Whoosh! Yi Fan's black robes fluttered in the wind and fluttered in the wind. After summoning the divine weapon, Yi Fan waved the unsheathed Blood Drinker saber at the horn-shaped mountain in the distance. Whoosh! A black arc of light shot out from the Blood Drinker saber's scabbard. The arc of light was so dazzling that people didn't dare to look at it directly. It was so fast that there was almost no time difference. The moment the arc of light flew out, it rushed into the peak of the horn-shaped mountain. Boom! The peak of the horn-shaped mountain was instantly cut off, revealing a smooth and neat section. Boom, the huge mountain peak rolled down, creating a huge rumbling sound. This time, the spiritual pressure lingering in the dense forest began to fluctuate between strong and weak, as if it was trembling. The saber had such power even before it was unsheathed. If it was unsheathed, wouldn't it destroy heaven and earth? Get lost, Yi Fan said calmly with Blood Drinker in his hand. Chapter 699. Seeing his opponent retreat, Yi Fan put away the Blood Drinker dagger. When Tenmoni had given him this divine weapon, he had personally told him that every time the Blood Drinker dagger was unsheathed, it must drink blood, otherwise the sheath would be uneasy. It was for this reason that Yi Fan had not unsheathed the dagger. After putting away the Blood Drinker dagger, Yi Fan found a large pile of dry firewood and piled it on the beach. Then he activated the Fire Snake Dragon Pearl in his body and pointed at the pile of firewood. The pile of firewood burned fiercely, the fire blazing and the flames soaring. Yi Fan plucked some large and fresh tree branches from the tree and covered the fire with them. The rising flames were covered by the wet branches, and suddenly thick smoke rose up into the sky. After doing all this, Yi Fan patted the dust off his hands, found a large dry wooden stake on the beach, and sat down with his back against it. The smoke signal had been sent out, and now all he had to do was wait. The gentle sea breeze, the warm sun, the soft beach, and the wide sea. Everything in front of him looked so beautiful. But Yi Fan was indifferent to the picturesque scenery in front of him. He had too many things to do, too many problems to think about, and simply did not have the mood to look at the scenery. He had to wait for the arrival of Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha, wait for the jinx to fall from the sky, wait for the experts of the other countries to fight to the death. In addition, he had to find a way to destroy this flame meteor and prevent Matsumoto Takeyoshi from obtaining this piece of meteoric iron. But this was easy to say, but difficult to do. This time his partners were not Akatsuki, but Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha. With the two of them by his side, his chances of destroying the flame meteor could be said to be very small. It seemed that he could only take one step at a time and act according to the circumstances. Thinking of this, Yi Fan bitterly smiled and shook his head. Back then, his only goal was to find the 9 cauldrons and rescue his beloved wife's soul. He wanted to be with his wife and spend the rest of his life with her. As for who would seize the world and whose fate belonged to, he didn't care at all. It had nothing to do with him. Now, not only did he have to search for the 9 cauldrons, he also had to worry about the country's affairs and save the people from disaster. Being the monarch of the Devil Realm was really tiring. As Yi Fan thought about it, he plucked a blade of grass from the wooden pile and held it in his mouth. Then, he put his hands on the pillow and lay down on the beach. He crossed his legs and looked up at the sky. In the sky, white clouds drifted leisurely, making people feel relaxed and happy. Meals should be eaten one mouthful at a time, and things should be done one by one. If he thought too much about it, it would only add to his worries and not be of any benefit. Taking advantage of the fact that Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha had not arrived yet, he might as well take a break and conserve his energy. As Yi Fan thought about it, he closed his eyes and rested. Less than half an hour after Yi Fan closed his eyes, Kamehameha's voice came from the sky. "Mr. Yi, you're so fast. You've arrived so early." Yi Fan, who was lying on the beach with a blade of grass in his mouth, opened his eyes and said with a smile, "Mr. Kamehameha is not slow either." Whoosh! Kamehameha, who was wearing a gray robe, jumped down from the sky and landed on the beach. Pah! The 5-foot-long wooden staff automatically flew back to Kamehameha's hand. "Where's Mr. Yagi? Hasn't he arrived yet?" Kamehameha leaned on the wooden staff and stepped on the fine sand. He slowly walked to Yi Fan's side and asked with a smile, "Well, isn't he already here?" Yi Fan, who was lying on the beach with his eyes closed, said with a smile. Kamehameha's expression froze, and he immediately turned to look at the sea. What surprised him was that there was no movement on the surface of the sea. Boom! Just as Kamehameha was puzzled, a huge wave suddenly rose from the sea, and it was several feet tall. On the huge wave, Bamu Chongqing, who was wearing a white robe and carrying 2 3-foot-long fat fish, stepped on the wave and came over. Kamehameha was stunned at first, but then he smiled with relief. This Bamu Chongqing was indeed the leader of Japan's Koga-ryu. Not only was his ninjutsu unparalleled, but he was also extremely proficient in the water escape technique. "We're in for a treat now." Yi Fan disappeared from the spot and instantly stood beside Kamehameha with his hands behind his back. He looked at Bamu Chongqing and smiled. "Mr. Yi is right," Kamehameha said with a smile. "We're in for a treat this time." Whoosh! While the two were talking and laughing, Bamu Chongqing, who was stepping on the huge wave, gracefully landed on the beach. Although he appeared from the sea, there was not a single drop of water on his body. It was evident that his water escape technique was very powerful. "Sorry to keep you two waiting." Yagi Zhongqing held the fat fish in his hand and walked slowly to the two of them. He nodded to the two of them and smiled. "We didn't eat anything before we came, so I went to the sea and caught 2 tunas for everyone to try." "Mr. Yagi is so thoughtful." Kamehameha stroked his long beard and smiled at Bamu Chongqing. "This time, I can taste the freshest sashimi, ha ha ha." "Brother Yagi, I'll help you." Yi Fan smiled and took the big fish from Bamu Chongqing's hand. "Brother Bufan is a Han, so he can't eat sashimi," Bamu Chongqing said with a smile. "In my opinion, one of these 2 tunas should be used to make grilled fish, the other should be used to make sashimi, and the rest should be used to make fish soup. What do you think?" "Excellent, excellent." Yi Fan clapped his hands and smiled. "Let's do as Brother Yagi says. I'll go to the island and check it out first. I'll pick some wild fruits and vegetables and bring back some game," Kamehameha said with a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Kamehameha," Bamu Chongqing said to Kamehameha with a smile. "Mr. Kamehameha, be careful when you go there. This Devil Island is a bit strange," Yi Fan said to Kamehameha with a smile. "Mr. Yi, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." After hearing Yi Fan's words, the wooden turtle and crane smiled. As he spoke, he leaned on his wooden staff and turned around to leave. He quickly disappeared into the dense forest. "Strange? What's strange?" After Kamehameha left, Bamu Chongqing asked Yi Fan. Yi Fan told Bamu Chongqing what happened just now. Yagi Zhongqing frowned when he heard that. "Don't worry, Brother Yagi." Yi Fan patted Bamu Chongqing's shoulder and said with a smile, "It's fine now." Bamu Chongqing nodded. They came to Devil Island this time to get the fire meteor that will fall from the sky in 5 days. Other than that, they didn't care about anything else. Since Yi Fan said it was fine, then it should be fine. "Come, Brother Yagi, let's clean up the fish," Yi Fan said as he stretched his right hand into the void. Buzz! After a flash of white light, 2 daggers more than 7 inches long appeared in Yi Fan's hands. The daggers were completely made of ice. They were crystal clear and flashed with a cold light. These 2 daggers were made by Yi Fan by activating his ice core and condensing it with the cold air it emitted. They were as hard as steel and extremely sharp. "Here, Brother Yagi." Yi Fan handed one of the ice daggers to Bamu Chongqing. Bamu Chongqing took the ice dagger with interest and examined it in front of his eyes. "Brother Bufan is really worthy of being from a family of weaponsmith. You can make such a sharp weapon with just a wave of your hand. It's really an eye-opener." Bamu Chongqing looked at the ice dagger in his hand and said with emotion. "Brother Yagi, you must be joking." Yi Fan smiled as he squatted down and began to scrape the tuna's scales. "Brother Bufan, I have something to ask you." "I don't know if I should ask?" Bamu Chongqing put aside the fat fish in his hand and asked Yi Fan. "What's wrong with Brother Yagi today? Why are you so polite?" Yifan used the ice dagger to scrape the fish scales skillfully and looked up at Bamu Chongqing with a smile. Brother Yagi, you can ask whatever you want. Okay, I'll ask you. Bamu Chongqing squatted down in front of Yifan and asked, Do you have any thoughts of destroying Fire Meteor? When Bamu Chongqing said this, the ice dagger in Yifan's hand suddenly stopped and his smile became dignified. He turned to look at Yagi Nagaking with a frown. It seems that I guessed right. Bamu Chongqing turned his head and said calmly. Yifan's expression explained everything. Are you going to stop me? Yifan frowned and asked Bamu Chongqing. He didn't expect Bamu Chongqing to guess his intentions. Since he already knew, he might as well be frank. I won't stop you, but I want to advise you that you can't do this, Bamu Chongqing said calmly. As for whether you will listen to my advice, I don't know. Why can't I do it? Yifan asked Bamu Chongqing. Have you thought about why Matsumoto Takeyoshi didn't send anyone else but you for such an important matter? Bamu Chongqing looked at Yifan and asked. His manpower is a little tight right now. Plus, the man in green has yet to recover and Crane in the clear sky is heavily injured. That's why he sent me here. Yifan looked at the sea and said calmly. That is one reason, but it is not the most important, Bamu Chongqing said. Not the most important? Yifan frowned and looked at Bamu Chongqing. This matter is actually a trap set by Matsumoto Takeyoshi for you. Bamu Chongqing looked into the depths of the forest and lowered his voice as he whispered to Yifan. Trap? Yifan asked in surprise. Shoo! Bamu Chongqing put his index finger to his mouth and motioned for Yifan to be softer. What trap? Yifan whispered to Bamu Chongqing with a serious expression. Let me ask you, why did Matsumoto Takeyoshi use your wife's soul to threaten you? Bamu Chongqing asked. Is there a need to ask? Of course it is for the 9 cauldrons, Yifan replied. Let me ask you again. How long have you been in the East Sea? Bamu Chongqing asked. Almost a year. Why? Yifan frowned and asked Bamu Chongqing. He didn't understand the relationship between these two questions. In this year, did you help him find the divine cauldrons? Bamu Chongqing asked. Yifan's expression changed, but he didn't say anything. Matsumoto Takeyoshi suspects that you've already found the divine cauldron, but you didn't tell him. That's why he's using this mission to test you, Yagi Long Kiyoshi said. Chapter 700. The Sisui River's water is surging, the fire dragon subduing the fire dragon has appeared, the enchantment of the heavenly lake has been broken, and the ferocious ghosts of the Loyu village have been subdued. You've been to 3 of these 4 places. Strange phenomena have appeared frequently, but you've gained nothing. If I were Matsumoto Takeyoshi, I would also be suspicious of you, Yagi Zhangqing said to Yifan, whose pupils had contracted. When the enchantment of the heavenly lake was broken, I was in the East Sea, Yifan said to Bamu Chongqing. Matsumoto Takeyoshi saw it with his own eyes. How long do you think you can fool Matsumoto Takeyoshi with your tricks? Bamu Chongqing turned to look at Yifan. You are the king of the devil world. If you want your primordial spirit to leave your body, it will be as easy as flipping your hand. Yifan's expression changed drastically when he heard this. He looked up at Bamu Chongqing. It seems that Matsumoto Takeyoshi guessed correctly. You have indeed found the divine cauldron. Bamu Chongqing turned his head and said calmly. The expert who broke the enchantment of the heavenly lake was none other than you, Brother Yi. Yifan remained silent. It could be considered a tacit admission. You must have rushed to Tibet because of the divine cauldron, right? Bamu Chongqing looked at the sea and asked Yifan. Yes, Yifan replied. Since Bamu Chongqing had already deduced it clearly, there was no need for him to hide it. The reason why Matsumoto Takeyoshi sent you this time was to test you and see if you are sincere in working for him, Bamu Chongqing continued. If the fire meteor is destroyed this time, you will confirm Matsumoto Takeyoshi's suspicion of you. At that time, you will be in a passive position. It is very likely that Matsumoto Takeyoshi will send you to carry out some trivial tasks and stay away from the clues of the 9 cauldrons. Yi Fan's expression turned solemn after hearing this. He did not say a word. He had calculated everything and was careful everywhere. In the end, Matsumoto Takeyoshi still saw through his flaws. Even Bamu Chongqing could deduce these things, let alone Matsumoto Takeyoshi. He was right. If he planned to destroy the fire meteor this time, then Matsumoto Takeyoshi would completely lose trust in him. He would not give him any clues of the 9 cauldrons at all. Listen to my advice. Complete this task successfully and dispel Matsumoto Takeyoshi's suspicion of you, Bamu Chongqing said to Yi Fan. There is an old saying in the Central Plains that goes, cleverness leads to the downfall of cleverness. Being too smart is not necessarily a good thing. Why are you helping me? Yi Fan frowned and asked Bamu Chongqing. I don't have many friends. You are one of them, Bamu Chongqing said with a smile. Brother Bamu Bamu Chongqing's words warmed Yi Fan's heart. He did not know what to say. Don't you and me. I'll clean up the fish. You go make the fire and get some fresh water, Bamu Chongqing said with a smile as he patted Yi Fan's shoulder. Okay. Yi Fan nodded with a smile. He put down the tuna fish in his hand and went directly to the black smoke coming out of the fire. He made the fire burn brighter and found a 3-foot rock nearby. He used the ice dagger in his hand to cut out a flat stone slab. Then, he hollowed out the rest of the stone and made a stone pot. The stone slab was used to fry the fish fillets and the stone pot was used to make the fish bone soup. He set up the stone pot, then activated the ice core in his body and pointed at the stone pot. Whoosh! A ray of cold air gushed out from his fingertips and shot into the stone pot. After the white light flashed, the stone pot was filled with ice cubes that were emitting cold smoke. With ice, there would naturally be fresh water. On the other side, Bamu Chongqing's ice dagger flew up and down. Soon, he removed the scales and bones of the 2 3-foot-long tuna fish. He first put the fish heads and bones into the stone pot. Then, he placed the fish fillets on the flat stone slab that Yi Fan had just cut out and gently smoothed them out. Whoosh! The ice dagger in Bamu Chongqing's hand quickly slid on the fish fillets. His movements were smooth and unrestrained. After the cold light of the dagger flashed, the fat and tender fish fillets were instantly turned into hundreds of thin sashimi slices. He was the sect master of Koga-ryu in Japan. His swordsmanship was naturally not a problem. Bamu Chongqing divided the stone slab and the sashimi slices into 2. Half of them were roasted on the fire and the other half were eaten raw. You stay here and watch the fire. I'll go get some oysters, Bamu Chongqing said to Yi Fan with a smile as he rolled up his sleeves and walked to the beach. Yi Fan smiled and shook his head. The Japanese placed great importance on food. They would not compromise at all. It could be said that their food culture had reached the pinnacle. Sizzle, under the roasting of the fire, the fat and tender fish fillets on the stone slab splattered and emitted a tempting fish fragrance. What a strong fish fragrance! Yi Fan was fiddling with the fire when Kamehameha's old voice came from afar. Yi Fan raised his head and looked at Kamehameha. He saw that he was dragging an extremely huge withered tree with his left hand and carrying a wooden staff on his shoulder with his right hand. On the wooden staff there were 3 pheasants, a wild rabbit, 3 or 4 huge coconuts, and a huge wild boar. In his arms there were all kinds of wild fruits that he could not name. They were all bright red. When Yi Fan saw this, he was secretly shocked. This Kamehameha was so strong. The huge withered tree and the fat wild boar weighed at least 500 kilograms. However, Kamehameha's expression was relaxed and he even whistled. It was an eye-opener for him to have such physical strength at such an old age. Mr. Kamehameha, you have a great harvest. Yi Fan smiled at Kamehameha. Mr. Yi, you must be joking. Kamehameha first threw the withered tree to the side, then took the wild boar, wild rabbit, and other wild animals from the wooden staff and laughed. This firewood and game should be enough for us to use for 5 days. As he spoke, he slowly walked to the fire, and took out all the wild fruits in his arms and placed them on the ground. Then, he reached out and picked up a translucent piece of sashimi from the stone slab and put it into his mouth. Good knife skills, good ingredients, Kamehameha said with a look of enjoyment. This time, I can taste the sashimi personally made by Mr. Yagi. It can be said that this trip was worth it, ha ha ha. The sashimi was as thin as a cicada's wing, smooth and tender. The knife skills were neat and uniform, and the plate presentation was so delicate. There was no need to guess that it must have been made by Bamuchongqing. Mr. Kamehameha, you made so much food. Are you going to celebrate the new year on this island? Bamuchongqing came in front of the two with a large green leaf in his hand and asked Kamehameha with a smile. The green leaf in his hand was full of fat oysters. As long as I have Mr. Yagi's sashimi, the new year is a new year. Kamehameha smiled. The three of them looked at each other and smiled, then sat around the fire. At this time, the ice in the stone pot had begun to melt, and bursts of steam were coming out. Yi Fan broke a pair of chopsticks with a fresh branch and handed it to Kamehameha. He asked with a smile, Mr. Kamehameha, did you find anything after checking it out just now? Kamehameha took the wooden chopsticks from Yi Fan with both hands and said meaningfully, everything is as Mr. Yi said. This Devil Island is not simple. Bamuchongqing looked up and asked Kamehameha while cutting a branch in his hand with an ice dagger, how is it not simple? Kamehameha picked up a piece of sashimi with the chopsticks and put it in his mouth. He said, this island is blessed by nature. It is like the head of a devil, forming a feng shui situation called Yimo suppresses the sea. Yi Fan and Bamuchongqing asked in unison, Yimo suppresses the sea? In terms of cultivation, the two of them were masters, but in terms of feng shui they were both laymen. That's right, Yimo suppresses the sea. Kamehameha put down the wooden chopsticks in his hand and said, this Yimo suppresses the sea feng shui situation is the most sinister and domineering in feng shui. It is formed naturally and is extremely rare. I thought I would never see this feng shui situation in my lifetime, but I didn't expect to see it with my own eyes today. Yi Fan took a wild fruit and put it in his mouth. He chewed it carefully and asked calmly, is this feng shui situation very powerful? It's not very powerful, it's very powerful. Kamehameha said with a serious face, this Yimo suppresses the sea is different from other feng shui situations. Other feng shui situations at most hide wind, gather qi, and the 5 elements, but this Yimo suppresses the sea is completely different. If this situation is completed, it will automatically absorb the sinister qi of heaven and earth for my use. It will also use illusions to attract passers-by to land on the island, then absorb their essence and soul to cultivate. This situation will awaken in 100 years, gain intelligence in 300 years, and become a spirit in 500 years. After 1,000 years, it will become a spirit-devouring sea demon. At that time, the human world will be plunged into misery and suffering. Mr. Guihe, do you mean that the spirit-devouring sea demon's original form is this island itself? Yi Fan asked with a frown. That's right, Kamehameha answered. Yi Fan was silent after hearing this. No wonder he couldn't see what kind of monster it was. After all this fuss, the island itself was the monster's original form. In Mr. Guihe's opinion, what realm is the Yimo suppresses the sea at on Demon Island? Bamuchongqing asked Kamehameha as he used a sharpened branch to pick up a few pieces of fish that were cooked on the charcoal fire and put them into his mouth. In my opinion, this Demon Island's feng shui situation has been formed for at least 500 years and has already become a spirit, Kamehameha said. In that case, we will be in danger on this island? Bamu Chongqing asked with a frown. Mr. Yagi, don't worry. As long as Mr. Yi is on this island, we won't be in any danger at all. Kamehameha looked at Yi Fan and said with a smile. Mr. Guihe, what do you mean by this? Why are you dragging me into this? Yi Fan smiled as he picked up a huge coconut from the ground. He split it into 2 halves and handed one half to Kamehameha and the other half to Bamu Chongqing. Mr. Yi is too modest. Kamehameha politely took the coconut with both hands and said with a smile, If I'm not wrong, the sharp corner on the demon's head was cut off by Mr. Yi, right? Bamu Chongqing frowned after hearing this. Kamehameha is really something. Oh? What do you mean, Mr. Guihe? Yi Fan used a branch to stir the charcoal fire and asked Kamehameha with a smile. Chapter 701. It seems that nothing can be hidden from Mr. Guihe's eyes, Yi Fan said with a smile as he picked up a few pieces of roasted fish with a tender branch and put them in his mouth. Yes, I was the one who cut off the horn on this demon island when I first came here. Consider it a lesson. Looks like this guy didn't recognize MT Tai and offended Mr. Yi, Kamehameha said to Yi Fan with a smile. Yi Fan smiled faintly but didn't say anything. He reached for a coconut, opened it, and slowly drank the coconut juice. Mr. Kamehameha, what do you think of this mission of capturing the flame meteor? Do you have any good plans? Bamu Chongqing held a green leaf, full of fat oysters in one hand in front of Kamehameha and asked. You're too kind, Mr. Yagi. Kamehameha politely reached out and took 2 oysters from the green leaf. He smiled and said, I'm old, and my brain isn't as good as it used to be. How could I come up with a good plan? Mr. Guihe, what are you talking about? Bamu Chongqing smiled and said, Mr. Guihe, you are a senior. You have more experience than us juniors. In terms of experience, qualifications, and wisdom, we are all inferior. Now, the 3 of us are partners and carry out missions together. It can be said that we are bound together for good or ill. Therefore, I hope that Senior will give us more guidance. Bamu Chongqing said as he handed the green leaf, containing the oysters, to Yi Fan. Yi Fan reached out and grabbed a few plump oysters, casually throwing them into the stone pot where the fish bone soup was being cooked. Although he had joined Matsumoto Takayoshi's camp for some time, he was still not used to eating raw food. Thank you, Mr. Yagi. Kamehameha peeled an oyster, picked up the tender meat with a thin branch, and put it into his mouth. He said, It's not that I don't want to offer you a plan, but the situation between us and the enemy is still unclear, so I can't make any plans. As the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes. In this old man's opinion, when the time comes, we can only react accordingly. Yagi Zhongqing nodded his head slowly. Mr. Guihe is right. Yi Fan put down the coconut and said, Now we don't know how many people there are, what their cultivation is, what their combat power is, and where they are. We really can't make a battle plan. Moreover, the falling area of the meteor is too large, covering the entire South China Sea. What we can do now is to wait and see what happens. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm just worried that if the fiery meteor falls into other parts of the South China Sea, the experts of other countries guarding there will get there first. Bamu Chongqing peeled an oyster in his hand and said calmly, The South China Sea is so big. It's not impossible. Well, what Mr. Yagi said does make sense. After Kamehameha listened to Bamu Chongqing, he stroked his long beard and nodded. Bamu Chongqing was right. The South China Sea was too big. The location given by Matsumoto Takayoshi was only a guess. After all, a meteor falling from the sky was one of the most mysterious celestial phenomena. The specific location of the meteor would be affected by many factors. You don't have to worry about this. In 5 days, I will ride a cloud and guard in the sky. As soon as I find signs of a fiery meteor, I will immediately inform you. Before it falls, we can make all preparations to ensure that nothing goes wrong. As Yi Fan spoke, he tied the semicircular coconut shell in his hand and a branch together with tree bark, making a natural spoon. Ha ha, this is a good idea, Kamehameha clapped and laughed. With Mr. Yi guarding in the clouds, this problem can be said to be easily solved. Bamu Chongqing nodded repeatedly after hearing this. The reason why Matsumoto Takeyoshi sent Yi Fan was not only to test his intentions, but Yi Fan's ability to ride the cloud was also one of the important reasons. Come, try the fish bone soup I made. Yi Fan scooped up the fish soup from the boiling stone pot with the coconut shell wooden spoon in his hand. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. After the sun set, the sky was full of stars as vast as the sea. On this day, the three of them ate crabs, stewed fish soup, roasted pork, drank coconut milk, and talked and laughed. At this moment, Yi Fan had already given up on the thought of destroying the flame meteor. Naturally, he appeared to be very open-minded. He chatted with the wooden turtle and the crane about everything under the sun. From time to time, he would laugh heartily. As a senior figure in Japan, Kamehameha had a lot of strange stories, myths, and legends. There was almost nothing that he did not know. Even the knowledgeable Yi Fan was amazed when he heard these stories. Bamu Chongqing had a smile on his face. He peeled an oyster in his hand and quietly listened to the two of them talk. From time to time, he would smile in relief. Although his cultivation was at the peak of perfection, he was not talkative. Mr. Yi, we have a lot to talk about today. This old man has a presumptuous request. I wonder if Mr. Yi can fulfill it? Next to the fire, Kamehameha casually added firewood to the fire and turned his head to ask Yi Fan with a smile. Mr. Kamehameha, you're too polite. Feel free to speak your mind. Yi Fan said with a smile as he scooped up a spoonful of milky white fish soup from the stone pot with a coconut shell wooden spoon. Kamehameha stared at Yi Fan and asked, Can this old man take a look at Mr. Yi Fan's flame sword? As soon as Kamehameha said that, Yi Fan immediately stopped eating the fish soup in his hand. Not only him, but Bamu Chongqing, who had been silent all this time, also raised his eyebrows and looked at Kamehameha. In Japan, all the experts were only allowed to touch their sword. They did not allow others to touch them easily. This was because to an expert, his weapon was his most loyal companion. How could he show it to others so easily? If the other party saw the characteristics of his moves from his weapon, wouldn't he be courting death? Ever since I saw the Li Fire divine weapon in Mr. Ye's hands on the battleship, this old man has been looking for an opportunity to take a look at it. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity, Kamehameha said as he turned his head with a smile. He used the wooden branch in his hand to stir the fire. Today, this old man is willing to sacrifice his old face to ask Mr. Yi to fulfill my wish. Bamu Chongqing turned his head to look at Yi Fan. Yi Fan thought for a moment and smiled in relief. He blew on the fish soup in the wooden spoon a few times and took a sip. I was wondering what kind of request it was. So it's this. Easy to talk about it. Yi Fan smiled as he slowly put down the wooden spoon. Bamu Chongqing's eyes narrowed. Yi Fan actually agreed to let Kamehameha see the Li Fire divine weapon. One had to know that not only was Kamehameha an expert in martial arts, but his swordsmanship was also at the peak of perfection. Back then, he had used the divine weapon Broken Jade in his hand to challenge the various experts in Japan. He had even cut his opponent's weapon in half with one move. That was how his name, Broken Swordsman, came about. Later on, the Japanese martial arts world felt that because he had a divine weapon, they no longer competed with him. They felt that he had an unfair advantage. When Kamehameha saw this, he cut a bamboo blade and used it to challenge the various major sects again. What was unbelievable was that even with the bamboo blade, Kamehameha could still easily cut his opponent's weapon in half with one move. The sharpness of this person's swordsmanship was evident. Yi Fan knew that this person was an expert in weapons and swordsmanship, but he still agreed to this person's request. Was he not afraid that Kamehameha would master the characteristics of the Li Fire Sword? However, when Bamu Chongqing thought about it, a faint smile appeared on his face. He smiled and shook his head. He picked up the coconut milk and drank a few mouthfuls. Yi Fan agreeing to Kamehameha's request only meant one thing. 2 words. Confidence. Kamehameha's eyes lit up, and his face was filled with joy. Yi Fan actually agreed. Mr. Yi, are you serious? Kamehameha asked Yi Fan in shock. Yi Fan did not answer. He maintained his cross-legged posture and waved his right hand in the air. Buzz, after a burst of dazzling red light flashed, the Li Fire divine weapon appeared out of thin air, hovering in front of Yi Fan. Puff. Yi Fan held the Li Fire divine weapon with one hand and slowly handed it to Kamehameha, who was sitting beside him. When Kamehameha saw this, he hurriedly threw the branch in his hand into the fire. He wiped his hands on his gray robe and respectfully took the Li Fire sword with both hands. It was obvious that Kamehameha was fascinated by the Li Fire sword. However, just as his hands were about to touch the Li Fire sword, Yi Fan suddenly withdrew the Li Fire sword from his hand. Mr. Yi. Kamehameha looked up at Yi Fan with a puzzled expression. Mr. Guihe, are you just going to observe? Yi Fan, who was holding the Li Fire sword, asked Kamehameha with a smile. Just observing, Kamehameha replied solemnly. Yi Fan smiled and placed the Li Fire sword in Kamehameha's hand. Kamehameha received the dazzling red Li Fire sword with both hands as if he was worshipping it. He respectfully admired it in front of his eyes shining. In his eyes Yi Fan saw one word, greed. However, in Yi Fan's eyes this was completely normal. It was obvious that Kamehameha was like him, a person who was obsessed with swords and sabers. For a sword fanatic, this kind of gaze was just a natural expression and did not represent any other improper thoughts. Of course, when one's infatuation reached a certain level, they would be overtaken by greed. Mr. Yi, can you unsheathe the sword? Kamehameha looked up and asked Yi Fan. Yes. Yi Fan nodded and smiled. Kamehameha smiled with satisfaction and slowly unsheathed the Li Fire sword from its scabbard. Clang! The Li Fire sword was less than an inch out of its scabbard when countless rays of dazzling red light spewed out from the sword. At the same time, the temperature around the three of them began to rise rapidly. When the Li Fire sword was completely unsheathed, the area around the three of them was covered in a fiery red, as if it was made of blood. Good weapon! Good weapon! The best weapon in the world, Li Fire supremacy! Kamehameha held the sword in one hand and caressed the sword less than an inch away from it with the other hand. He praised it from the bottom of his heart. This Li Fire sword is indeed good. However, Yi Fan smiled as he drank his coconut milk and said, the broken jade in Mr. Guihe's wooden staff is also not bad. Chapter 702. Kamehameha was not the only one who was shocked by Yi Fan's words. Even Bamu Chongqing, who was sitting opposite Yi Fan, was shocked. He did not expect that Kamehameha's divine weapon, broken jade, would be hidden in the wooden staff that he carried with him. Ha ha ha! After a long time, the wooden turtle crane looked up to the sky and laughed. Mr. Yi is indeed powerful. You actually guessed where this old man has hidden the saber for many years. This old man admires Mr.'s cultivation. As Kamehameha spoke, he sheathed the ever-flame sword, which was glowing with red light and rising heat, and returned it to Yi Fan with both hands. Ever since he became famous at the age of 20, he used a secret technique to seal the sword energy on the divine weapon, broken jade, and hid it in the wooden staff. For so many years, no one had discovered this secret. He did not expect that Yi Fan would reveal it today. To be able to see through the divine weapon hidden in the wooden staff and sealed with a secret technique, this young man was indeed not simple. Yi Fan took the ever-flame sword with a smile and asked Kamehameha, "As the saying goes, it is impolite not to reciprocate. I wonder if Mr. Kamehameha can lend me the sword and the staff to take a look?" "Ha ha! Of course." Kamehameha laughed loudly. He reached out and held the wooden staff in front of him with one hand, while his other hand stroked the wooden staff from afar. Buzz, as the wood symbol tortoise and crane stroked the dark brown wooden staff, a faint gray radiance instantly rose up from it. "Savadena, Monica!" Kamehameha stroked the wooden staff as he chanted. Buzz in the gray flames, the light from the wooden staff became even more intense. At this moment, the wooden staff suddenly turned into a gray staff. Dina Mora Carabona. Boom! As Kamehameha finished his incantation, countless rays of gray light shot out from the wooden staff. The light was so intense that the bonfire that the three of them were sitting around had turned into a light gray color. What a powerful blade chi! Bamu Chongqing was shocked. Yi Fan narrowed his eyes and frowned. This jade-breaking saber really lived up to its reputation. It could actually release such a terrifying saber aura. Crack! Crack! Countless cracks appeared on the wooden staff in Kamehameha's hand, and they were becoming more and more concentrated. Bang! Along with a crisp sound, the wooden staff in the hands of the wooden turtle crane instantly transformed into countless pieces of wood and exploded into pieces. A gray saber suddenly appeared in Kamehameha's hand. This saber was 4 feet long, and its arc was like a curved eyebrow. Its entire body was gray, and its entire body was smooth and simple without any markings. At the tip of the slender saber hilt, there were a few strands of black hair tied together. It looked extremely casual, but it didn't lose its simple elegance. The entire saber looked simple and exquisite, as if it was made by nature. I've sealed this jade-breaking saber for more than 50 years. I thought I would never use it in this lifetime. I didn't expect it to see the light of day again today. As Kamehameha spoke, he gently stroked the saber in his hand, as if it was an old friend that he hadn't seen for many years. Buzz! The moment Kamehameha stroked the saber, the jade-breaking saber let out a crisp sound, and its entire body shone brightly. "Mr. Yi, please." Kamehameha held the saber with both hands and handed it to Yi Fan. Yi Fan didn't dare to delay, and he took the jade-breaking saber with both hands. "Good saber!" Yi Fan blurted out the moment he took the saber. The saber's blade chi was extremely pure, without any impurities. It felt like a lotus flower that was untainted by mud, aloof from worldly affairs, yet elegant and noble. "Mr. Guihe, can you unsheathe the saber?" Yi Fan asked Kamehameha. "Mr. Yi, please." Kamehameha extended his hand and gestured to Yi Fan, smiling. Yi Fan began to unsheathe the saber slowly. Buzz! Less than an inch after the saber was unsheathed, countless rays of dazzling gray light gushed out from the jade-breaking saber, radiating brilliance in all directions. When Yi Fan unsheathed the saber, everything within a radius of 30 feet had turned gray. Jade-breaking saber, cutting gold and breaking jade. What a good name! The saber lives up to its name. Yi Fan held the saber in front of him, looking at the snow-white blade. "Mr. Yi, you flatter me." Kamehameha waved his hand and smiled. Yi Fan sheathed the jade-breaking saber and returned it to Kamehameha with both hands as he asked, "If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Guihe, you've never used this jade-breaking saber to kill anyone, right?" He came out from the blood demon pool and had the blood demon's spiritual power, so he was very familiar with the smell of blood. However, there was no smell of blood on the jade-breaking saber's blade. "Mr. Yi, you're very capable." Kamehameha took the jade-breaking saber with a smile and said, "You're right. I've killed many people, but I've never used this saber to kill anyone. However, I've broken many weapons with this saber." Yi Fan smiled and didn't say anything. He had heard about the origin of Kamehameha's saber-breaking saber from Onijiro. Kamehameha put down the jade-breaking saber and asked Yi Fan, "There's something I don't understand. I'd like to ask Mr. Yi for advice." Mr. Guihe, please tell me, Yifan said. I used a secret technique to seal the saber's aura and hid it in a wooden staff. No one knew about it for decades. Kamehameha asked Yifan with a smile, how did you find out about this? He was very curious about how Yifan could easily tell where he hid the saber, so he asked. Ha ha ha! Yifan laughed out loud when he heard that. Why are you laughing for no reason? Kamehameha was confused by Yifan's laughter. Yifan picked up a piece of dried boar meat and put it in his mouth. He looked at Kamehameha and said with a smile, this has nothing to do with my cultivation. Mr. Guihe told me himself. I told Mr. Yi? Kamehameha was even more confused. Bamu Chongqing also looked at Yifan suspiciously. Let me ask Mr. Guihe, Yifan said to Kamehameha with a smile as he chewed the dried meat. Did you hunt this boar? Yes, I did hunt this boar. Why? Kamehameha didn't understand what this had to do with the boar. Let me ask Mr. Guihe again. How heavy is this boar? Yifan continued to ask Kamehameha. This. Kamehameha frowned and said, it's at least 150 kilograms. That's it. Yifan scooped a spoonful of fish soup with a coconut shell wooden spoon and took a sip. He continued, when you came back from hunting, you used the wooden staff in your hand to carry this boar. If this wooden staff was an ordinary item, it wouldn't be able to withstand the weight of 150 kilograms. Just this point alone proves that the wooden staff in your hand is not an ordinary item. You're known as the broken swordsman in Dongying. Who doesn't know that your broken jade sword is invincible? Therefore, I boldly guessed that the broken jade sword was in your wooden staff. I didn't expect that I would be right. Ha ha ha! After listening to Yifan's deduction, Kamehameha was stunned at first, then he threw his head back and laughed. He didn't expect that Yifan would be able to deduce the location of his divine weapon just because he carried a wild boar back. Bamu Chongqing also smiled in relief after hearing this. These two seemingly unrelated matters were actually connected in such a way. Looks like it's not that my sealing technique isn't good enough, but that Mr. Yi is too smart. Ha ha ha! Kamehameha laughed out loud. Mr. Kamehameha, you should change to a steel staff in the future. That way, you'll be able to carry a boar that weighs hundreds of kilograms without anyone noticing. Yifan joked with Kamehameha as he drank the fish soup. Kamehameha laughed again after hearing this. He found this young man more and more interesting. Plop, just as the three of them were talking and laughing, a loud splash suddenly came from the sea in the distance. It was as if something heavy had fallen into the sea. Bamu Chongqing's expression changed slightly as he turned his head to look at the sea. Kamehameha stopped smiling and stood up, looking at the sea with his sharp eyes. The night was calm and tranquil, so why was there such a huge sound of crashing waves? The two of them were shocked. Don't panic. Someone is testing the waters, Yifan said calmly as he fiddled with the fire. I didn't think that we would have a guest the day after we arrived. Kamehameha sat back down next to the fire and said with a smile. Plop, plop, two more loud splashes came from the sea. The sound was twice as loud as before, and the distance was closer. This isn't testing the waters. Bamu Chongqing looked up at the two of them and said, this is a warning to us. If they were testing the waters, they would at most warn them once, not twice. We'll wait here and deal with the situation by sticking to the status quo, Yifan said as he drank the fish soup. If they don't attack us, we won't attack them. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha looked at each other and nodded in tacit agreement. Their primary mission was to bring the fire meteor back, not to kill it. While ensuring the completion of the mission, they would try their best not to fight with the other party. Of course, if the other party was overbearing, then they could only counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir. Whoosh, whoosh, the waves kept surging on the beach, making rustling sounds. The three of them ate and drank, and no one said a word. If they guessed correctly, there would be more loud splashes in a while, and they would be getting closer and closer to Demon Island. However, what puzzled them was that even after half an incense stick's worth of time had passed, the sound of the huge waves did not come again. Obviously, the other party's warning did not have any effect. It's impolite not to reciprocate. They've given their warning, now it's our turn, Yi Fan said, put down the coconut shell wooden spoon in his hand, and slowly stood up from the fire. He stretched out his right hand, and with a thought, he activated his spiritual energy. Buzz, as the heavenly demon power in Yi Fan's energy reserve surged out, a huge ball of spiritual energy appeared in his hand out of thin air. The ball of light was 5 feet in size, and its red light was dazzling. It kept spinning above his palm, making a buzzing sound. Buzz, buzz, buzz above the red ball of light. A few streaks of black light swam wildly, shuttling back and forth like lightning. The heavenly demon power's characteristic was that it would become stronger against stronger opponents. Ever since Yi Fan cultivated to the realm of the Phoenix Dance of the 9 Heavens, his heavenly demon power had also increased, so much so that the black light appeared. After the ball of spiritual energy condensed, Yi Fan took a big step forward, leaned back, raised one arm, and threw the ball of spiritual energy in his hand. Whoosh! Chapter 703. Boom! As Yi Fan's spiritual chi ball rushed into the sea, a huge, dazzling ball of light exploded from the surface of the sea. The ball of light was dozens of feet in size. It was red and black and looked extremely dazzling in the dark night. Boom! The seawater, which was dozens of feet thick, shot out from the sea like a giant dragon and rushed into the sky crazily. It was hundreds of feet tall. Whoosh! At the same time, a red and black halo appeared out of thin air on the surface of the sea and spread rapidly along the surface of the sea. Whoosh! On the surface of the sea, a huge circular ripple surged. Whoosh! The violent sea breeze stirred up by the shock wave quickly rushed to the shore, causing the flames on the bonfire to flicker. Sparks flew everywhere, and the flames were almost extinguished. When everything calmed down, Yi Fan sat down by the bonfire again. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha sat there in disbelief. They were so shocked that they could not say a word. The power of Yi Fan's move was almost no different from a small storm. Fortunately, the spiritual chi ball had landed in the center of the sea. If it had landed on other islands, it could have raised a medium-sized island to the ground in an instant. It was no wonder that during the demon-slaying conference, although this person faced hundreds of experts, he could defeat them effortlessly with one move. The strength of this person's spiritual chi cultivation was beyond their imagination. Bamu Chongqing suddenly felt a little regretful at this time. If he could witness Yi Fan's glory during the demon-slaying conference, wouldn't it be a great blessing in life? Different from Bamu Chongqing's experience, Kamehameha felt a little fortunate at this time. He was glad that he did not make Yi Fan an enemy. When Yi Fan taught the green-eyed boy a lesson, he thought that even if Yi Fan did not use his full strength, he would at least use 50% of his cultivation. Now it seemed that Yi Fan did not have the intention to take the green-eyed boy's life at all. The strength that Yi Fan used at that time was not even 1% of his strength. So long as he wanted to, it would only take a blink of an eye to eliminate the blue-eyed boy. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. Everyone better remember this name. If you see him in the future, you must be careful and not underestimate him. The words that Matsumoto Takeyoshi had said when he had first met the experts once again lingered in Kamehameha's ears. Back then, Yi Fan was already like this, let alone now. The difference between Yi Fan's current cultivation and that of that time was like the difference between heaven and earth. There was no comparison at all. If Yi Fan back then was a firefly, then the current Yi Fan was the light of the moon. He didn't know about the others, but he definitely didn't want to be Yi Fan's opponent. I'll keep watch tonight. Both of you can rest. Yi Fan added firewood to the fire and said to the two of them, "I'm afraid that the other party has been suppressed by Mr. Spiritual Chi cultivation and won't dare to come near us again." Kamehameha smiled at Yi Fan and said, "Maybe he's already been crushed by Mr.'s move and buried in the belly of a fish." Yi Fan's move just now was so powerful that even the two of them were completely shocked, let alone the other party. In his opinion, it was already good that the other party could survive. The other party was indeed hit by my spiritual chi, but he didn't die. Instead, he dived into the sea and hid. Yi Fan raised his head and said to Kamehameha with a serious expression, "Dived into the sea?" Kamehameha was shocked when he heard that. Yagi Zhongqing was also shocked when he heard this. He frowned. To be able to escape unscathed from Yi Fan's overbearing move, the other party didn't come with good intentions. If I'm not wrong, the other party should be a spell master who is proficient in the art of water manipulation, Yi Fan said to the two of them with a frown. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha nodded slowly when they heard Yi Fan's words. Yi Fan's reasoning was reasonable. Yi Fan's overbearing move just now must have been neutralized by the other party using the art of water manipulation to condense a large amount of seawater. To be able to use the art of water manipulation to such perfection, the other party's level of spell was unimaginable. Just as the two of them were frowning and thinking, Yi Fan suddenly stood up and walked slowly to the seaside. Seeing Yi Fan stand up for no reason, the two of them stood up with a look of suspicion and walked to the seaside. When they saw the horrifying scene on the seaside, the two of them suddenly narrowed their eyes. The beach was densely covered with countless dead fish, as many as tens of thousands. The small fish were about 5 feet long, and the big fish were about 7 to 8 feet long. Under the push of the waves, they kept gathering on the beach, which was a shocking sight. Yi Fan, who was standing on the beach, squatted down and bent down to pick up a dead fish. He put it in front of his eyes to examine it carefully. The fish in his hand was already dismembered. When Yi Fan picked it up, the fish meat on the fish fell off with a crackling sound. Yi Fan's frown deepened when he saw this. This person is really powerful. Not only is he proficient in the art of water manipulation, but he can also control the creatures in the sea for my use, Yi Fan said solemnly as he threw the dead fish aside. Control the creatures in the sea? Bamu Chongqing frowned and said in surprise, "Is it the art of psychic communication?" After hearing this, Kamehameha's expression changed slightly. "That's right," Yi Fan said with a frown. "My move just now was resisted by the other party's art of water manipulation and psychic communication." He mobilized the fish around him to form a huge fish array to counteract the power of my spiritual energy. "Brother Bufan, why are you so sure that these dead fish were not caused by the blast just now?" Bamu Chongqing asked. "Yi Fan's power just now was strong enough to kill these fish." "Brother Yagi, look," Yi Fan said to Bamu Chongqing. "The smallest fish are about 5 feet long, and the big ones are about 10 feet long. If they were killed by my spiritual energy, they should be of all sizes." Bamu Chongqing suddenly understood. "We have to be prepared tonight to prevent the other party from attacking at night," Yi Fan said as he stood up. "Does he dare to come ashore on the island?" Kamehameha asked with a frown. "I don't know if he dares to come ashore on the island, but I can guarantee that there will be more than one person on the island." With a serious expression, Yi Fan wiped the mucus off his hands and looked at the sea. He said calmly, in the blink of an eye, it was late at night. Beside the fire, the three of them lay on the warm sand and closed their eyes to rest. Bamu Chongqing used one hand as a pillow and breathed heavily. For a ninja who often carried out assassination missions, maintaining vigilance and rest was one of the most basic skills. Even an ordinary ninja had such skills, let alone Bamu Chongqing, who was the leader of the Japanese ninja world. Kamehameha snored softly and seemed to be in deep sleep. But this was only on the surface. He, who was proficient in special techniques, could sleep on the surface but not the mind. In other words, He could let his body rest while his mind remained awake. Right now, he seemed to be snoring and had entered a deep sleep, but in reality, he was extremely awake. Among the three of them, Yi Fan was the one who slept the best. His expression was calm and his breathing was even. The corners of his mouth were slightly raised as if he was dreaming. But this was not the case. Only Yi Fan's body was sleeping soundly. His life origin spirit had already left his body and was floating high in the sky. Above the clouds, he observed every movement on the surface of the sea with starlight above his head. He could clearly see a small ant on the ground from 10,000 feet away, but he could not do anything in the bottomless sea. The reason why the other party was not willing to retreat was because of this. It seemed that his cultivation had to reach a higher level. He could not just stay at his current level. If he had time, he had to study the fourth stage of the mysterious sky secret essentials, Moon Dance of the Flying Heavens, and the second stage of the Proud Moon Heavenly Scripture, Waning Moon chapter. This was so that when he cultivated in the future, he would not have to rush at the last minute. Sha sha sha, just as he was deep in thought, there was movement on the surface of the sea. Under the illumination of the starlight that filled the sky, a several miles long greenish-gray light belt emerged from the sparkling sea surface. It stuck close to the sea surface and gradually moved closer to the Demon Island's beach. Its speed was slow and it made rustling noises. Yi Fan saw it and immediately felt his scalp tingle. That greenish-gray belt of light was not anything else, it was a huge sea crab. These sea crabs were completely different from other sea crabs. The smallest of them was 3 to 4 feet long and the largest was 7 to 8 feet long. A pair of crab pincers were serrated and looked extremely terrifying. The sea of crabs was densely packed, and there were tens of thousands of them crawling forward in groups. The other party had begun to move. When Yi Fan thought of this, he immediately urged his primordial spirit to return to his body. Shua Yi Fan, who was above the clouds, disappeared into thin air. When Yi Fan's primordial spirit returned to his body and he opened his eyes, Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha had already stood up. They also heard the rustling sound hidden in the wave. Did you see it clearly? What is it? Bamu Chongqing directly asked Yi Fan. Since they had heard the sound, Yi Fan must have heard it as well. The reason why he did not react for so long must be that his primordial spirit had left his body and gone out to investigate the situation. Yagi Long Kiyoshi had already guessed this. Crabs that are a few feet long. There are tens of thousands of crabs. Yi Fan stood up and said to the two, "Crabs? I like them." Hearing Yi Fan say this, Kamehameha immediately smiled and said, "I will cook a few for the two of you to try. These crabs can't be eaten. They are poisonous." Yi Fan patted the sand off his hands and said to Kamehameha, "The shells of these giant crabs were glowing green and their pincers were dark red. It was obvious that they were poisonous." "Sigh, what a pity." Kamehameha shook his head and sighed. Sha sha sha, the dense rustling sound was getting closer and closer. It was to the point that they could vaguely see the greenish-gray shell of the sea of crabs. At this moment, the speed of the sea of crabs was no longer slow. They had begun to charge. Chapter 704. Killer Crab. Under the moonlight, Bamu Chongqing frowned as he looked at the huge crab swarm that surrounded them like a tide. Japanese ninjas were good at using poison, and they were surrounded by the sea, so they were naturally very familiar with the poisonous creatures in the sea. Therefore, when the crab swarm appeared in their sight, Bamu Chongqing immediately recognized this highly poisonous creature. This creature was called green light crab, because of the green light emitted from its shell, and because of its highly poisonous body, it was called killer crab. It was said that this creature was extremely poisonous, and a single drop of its mucus could poison an adult bull to death. Most ninjas often use the poison on their weapons to complete assassination missions. As long as the weapon that had been dipped in the poison made a cut, even if it was just a needle-sized wound, the poisoned person would die in less than a minute. These creatures are extremely poisonous. Don't let them touch you, or you will definitely die, Kamehameha said with a serious expression. Isn't that simple? Can't we just use fire to attack? Yi Fan asked the two. He had the distant fire sword and the fire snake dragon ball, so burning these poisonous creatures was a piece of cake. No. Kamehameha shook his head and said, the killer crab's entire body is poisonous. If we use fire to burn it, the toxicity will not be reduced, and it will produce a large amount of poisonous smoke, which will be even more troublesome. There are tens of thousands of these killer crab. If they turn into poisonous smoke and float to Demon Island, I'm afraid that all the creatures living on this island will be instantly poisoned to death. Bamu Chongqing said. What a despicable method! Yi Fan narrowed his eyes and said coldly. The reason why the other party used these highly poisonous killer crab to deal with them was to make them feel helpless and give up Demon Island. If fire doesn't work, what about sword energy? Yi Fan frowned and asked the two. That won't work either, Bamu Chongqing said calmly. Although the knife can attack from a distance, the killing range is too small. It's like a drop in the bucket. It can't effectively stop the crab from coming ashore. Moreover, the knife will cause the venom to splash, which will make us passive. How about this? Kamehameha looked at the two of them and said, let's seal this island with a barrier. That way we won't have to worry about the killer crabs landing on the island. This method is worth a try. Bamu Chongqing nodded. With the cultivation of the three of them, they could completely use an invisible barrier to seal off the entire Demon Island. That way, the problem in front of them would be easily solved. Not only would they be able to defend the Demon Island, they would also not have to worry about the attacks of the killer crab horde. That's not a good idea, Yi Fan said to the other two. Setting up a barrier can indeed stop the killer crabs, but the three of us will also be sealed off. Think about it, if these poisonous creatures completely cover the entire invisible barrier, won't we become turtles in a jar, completely cut off from the outside world? That way, not to mention fire meteors, we won't even know if the sky is clear or cloudy. This. Kamehameha frowned. Yi Fan's words were not without reason. Then what do we do? We can't give up Demon Island because of these beasts, right? Bamu Chongqing looked at the endless crab horde less than 100 zhang away from the shore and asked. I have a way to deal with these beasts, Yi Fan said. What way? Bamu Chongqing asked. The two of you stand beside me. You'll know in a moment, Yi Fan said with a smile. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha looked at each other, then quickly walked to Yi Fan's side and stood beside Yi Fan. Although the two of them did not know what method Yi Fan would use to deal with these troublesome killer crabs, Yi Fan's cultivation was the highest among the three of them. Since he said that he had a way to deal with them, it should not be wrong. Sha sha sha. The tide-like killer crabs were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they had reached the shoreline of Demon Island. They were already less than 100 zhang away from the three of them. Yi Fan stood there motionlessly, his eyes slightly narrowed. He was as steady as Mount Tai. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha stood on either side of Yi Fan. As they looked at the crazily attacking crab horde that numbered in the tens of thousands, their expressions became even more serious. Kamehameha clenched the jade-severing saber in his hand and was on high alert. Bamu Chongqing also had his saber in hand, ready to unsheath it at any moment. 10 zhang, 9 zhang, 8 zhang. The killer crabs were getting closer and closer. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The few killer crabs that were the size of calves at the front let out frenzied roars. They raised their huge, sharp pincers and pounced toward the three of them viciously. When the crab horde was less than 5 zhang away from the three of them, Kamehameha furrowed his brows and called out to Yi Fan, Mr. Yi. Yi Fan remained unmoved with a smile on his face. When the crab horde was less than 4 zhang away from the three of them, Chongqing could not help but call out to him, "Brother Buffon." If the crab horde was allowed to get any closer, they would have no choice but to attack. Whoosh! Just when the few killer crabs at the front were less than 3 zhang away from the 3 of them, Yi Fan sprang into action. With a thought, he activated the spiritual energy in his body. Whoosh! A rainbow-colored ball of light about 1 zhang in size appeared out of thin air. It instantly enshrouded Chongqing and Kamehameha before slowly rising from the ground. Shar, when the 3 of them were less than 1 zhang away from the ground, the few killer crabs at the front had already charged toward the spot where the 3 of them had just been standing. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Seeing that the 3 of them were floating away from the ground, the few killer crabs immediately let out ear-piercing screeches in exasperation. However, at this moment, Yi Fan did not raise his body. Instead, he maintained the spiritual energy ball of light at a height of 1 zhang and remained suspended in the air. He looked at the horde of killer crabs below him with a smile on his face. Squeak, one of the brightly colored killer crabs, seemed to be the leader of the horde. When it saw that the 3 of them were not very far from the ground, it immediately let out a terrifying roar. The few huge killer crabs immediately reacted after hearing the order from their leader. Then, a terrifying scene unfolded before everyone's eyes. The few huge killer crabs quickly gathered below Yi Fan's feet. Then, they stepped on each other's bodies and started to stack up. They wanted to continue hunting the 3 of them who were floating in the air. Soon, the few stacked killer crabs reached a height of more than 1 zhang. However, just as they were stacking on top of each other, Yi Fan had already raised the 7-colored spiritual energy ball by 5 feet. At the same time, Yi Fan pointed his finger sword at the few stacked killer crabs below him. Whoosh! A red light as thick as a finger shot out from Yi Fan's fingertip. Poof! 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 The red light went straight up and down, instantly piercing through the stacked killer crabs. Before the killer crabs could understand what was going on, they were instantly killed. After doing all this, Yi Fan retracted his finger sword and looked at the Crab King with a smile on his face. Obviously, he was deliberately provoking the Crab King. When the Crab King realized that Yi Fan had killed all of its capable subordinates with one move, it was instantly enraged. Squeak! Squeak! The brightly colored Crab King let out a crazy roar and gave orders to the thousands of killer crabs. Whoosh! After hearing the Crab King's order, the tens of thousands of killer crabs that were rushing towards Demon Island immediately surrounded them from all directions. The killer crabs gathered densely at Yi Fan's feet and began to climb up crazily. After seeing this, Yi Fan smiled slightly. That was exactly what he wanted the killer crabs to do. Whoosh! The crazily climbing killer crabs quickly reached a height of more than 1 zhang. Yi Fan calmly and unhurriedly raised the 7-colored ball of light, maintaining a distance that was neither too close nor too far from the crab swarm at the very top. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Yi Fan's 7-colored spiritual energy ball had already reached a height of more than 100 zhang. And the killer crabs that had gathered on the ground were already like a small mountain. The killer crabs squeaked strangely and scrambled to climb up, wanting to bite the 3 people in the air into bones. However, no matter how high the killer crabs were, they could not catch up to Yi Fan's height. When Yi Fan's 7-colored spiritual energy ball reached a height of more than 150 zhang, the killer crabs' height began to stagnate. Their height had already reached its limit. On the ground, the corpses of hundreds of poisonous crabs with incomplete limbs were scattered all over the place, and the smell of blood assailed their nostrils. These corpses had all died from carelessly falling from the sky when they were stacked up. Squeak! The Crab King, who was surrounded by hundreds of giant killer crabs, saw that the killer crab's height could not increase and issued a new order to the killer crabs. After hearing their leader's order, the hundreds of giant killer crabs at the top of the crab mountain lifted their bodies at the same time and sprayed venom at the 3 people in the air. Whoosh, 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 hundreds of viscous venom instantly hit Yi Fan's seven-colored spiritual energy ball. However, even though the venom was extremely poisonous and could kill upon contact with blood, it was completely useless against Yi Fan's spiritual chi light ball. Whoosh, 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 as soon as the venom touched the spiritual energy ball, it instantly turned into green smoke and disappeared without a trace. It's my turn now. Yi Fan, who was inside the spiritual energy ball, curled the corners of his mouth and said coldly. He suddenly activated the ice core in his body, and at the same time, stretched out his right palm and slammed it down on the killer crabs that had gathered like a mountain. Whoosh! A silver-white light beam that was about 1 zhang thick shot out from Yi Fan's palm. The light beam shot out in a diffuse manner and was dazzling. The cold air was biting cold, and it was like a white waterfall pouring down from the sky. It was extremely beautiful. Whoosh! The dazzling cold light beam instantly enveloped the hundreds of zhang tall killer crabs that had piled up like a mountain. Crunch, 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 as the crisp sound continued to ring out, huge ice blocks began to appear from the top of the killer crab's mountain and spread down at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, the tens of thousands of killer crabs that had been crazily climbing up a moment ago had turned into an ice crab mountain. On the ground, the crab king that was frozen in the ice shell stared with its two huge pillar-shaped eyes, as if it was in disbelief at the scene in front of it. Inside the seven-colored spiritual energy ball, Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha's mouths were half open. They were completely stunned by Yi Fan's ice crab swarm. They only knew that the peerless divine weapon in Yi Fan's hand, the Frost Dragon Sword, was able to release an extremely cold chi that could shock the world. However, they did not expect that Yi Fan would be able to release such an extremely cold chi with just a wave of his hand. The two of them did not understand why Yi Fan had deliberately angered the Crab King, but now they understood. Yi Fan wanted to gather them together and then kill them all at once. Chapter 705. After freezing all of the killer crabs, Yi Fan activated the spirit energy ball and brought Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha back to the surface of Demon Island. "Looks like we'll be able to sleep well tonight," Yi Fan said with a smile as he withdrew the rainbow spirit energy ball and faced the sea. "Why do you say that, Mr. Yi?" Kamehameha turned to look at the sea and asked Yi Fan. That person retreated in the face of difficulties and used the water manipulation technique to escape, Yi Fan said with a smile as he looked at the sparkling surface of the sea under the starlight. Although he couldn't see the psychic master who was proficient in the water manipulation technique in the deep sea, he could completely sense that person's aura. That person's aura was traveling further and further along the seabed. At this moment, he was already several hundred kilometers away and was rapidly retreating from the South Sea. It was clear that Yi Fan's shocking cultivation had completely intimidated that person. If he didn't leave now, he was afraid that not only would he fail to seize the island, but he would also be killed. "Looks like he was scared out of his wits by Mr. Ye's frost chi cultivation," Kamehameha said with a smile as he stroked his long beard. "We have to be careful of him coming back," Bamu Chongqing said. They were in the open while their opponent was in the dark. It was unknown whether or not this person would come back. "He's currently retreating from the South Sea and probably won't come back." Yi Fan turned to look at Bamu Chongqing and said with a smile, "If he comes back, I won't let him go so easily." Bamu Chongqing slowly nodded after hearing this. "Do you want me to push this ice crab mountain into the sea?" Kamehameha walked in front of the ice mountain that was over 1,000 feet tall and constantly emitting cold smoke. He raised his head and asked Yi Fan with a smile. "It's better to leave this crab mountain on the island," Yi Fan said with a smile. "It can serve as a warning to those who want to chase us away from the island." "Killing the chicken to warn the monkey, good idea," Kamehameha said with a smile. Soon, it was the next morning. Everything was just as Yi Fan had expected. Nothing unusual happened in the nearby sea region during the night. Demon Island was extremely quiet and quiet. At this moment, a violent sea breeze was blowing on the surface of the South China Sea. The huge waves caused by the sea breeze were constantly slapping against the rugged reefs and strange rocks around Demon Island, producing loud splashing sounds. In the distant horizon, dark clouds covered the sky, and a black mass was rolling in the direction of Demon Island. Within the dark clouds, lightning flashed from time to time, followed by a few muffled thunders. The weather at sea was changeable all year round, and a storm was coming. When I was hunting, I found a cave on this Demon Island. It's big enough to accommodate the three of us. We can go there and hide for a while. The wooden turtle and crane, whose gray robes fluttered in the sea breeze, raised their heads to look at the dark clouds in the distance, and said to the two of them, "That would be the best," Bamu Chongqing said. "You and Bufan Kun go there first. I'll catch some fish and crabs, and I'll be there soon." Yagi Long Kiyoshi said as he walked towards the beach. He grew up by the sea, so he was very familiar with this kind of weather. This kind of stormy weather lasted for a long time, from 1 day to 3 days at most. The wild boars and pheasants that Kamehameha hunted had been contaminated by the killer crabs that landed on the island last night. They could no longer be eaten, so he had to prepare some food before the storm arrived. "Mr. Yi, please come with me," Kamehameha said to Yi Fan as he tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. His figure rose into the air, and he flew toward the mountainside of Demon Island. Yi Fan nodded, and his figure floated off the ground. He followed closely behind Kamehameha and flew through the air. "Mr. Yi, please take a look. The cave I mentioned is there." In the air, Kamehameha pointed at a cave on the island below and said, "Mister, you can go into the cave first to prepare water and fire items. I'll go get some game and dry firewood, and I'll be there soon." "Okay." Yi Fan nodded. Kamehameha nodded slightly to Yi Fan, then turned around and flew toward a dense forest on the island. Yi Fan activated his movement technique, lowered his altitude, and landed at the cave entrance. The cave entrance was located halfway up the mountain on Demon Island. It was 5 feet wide and 8 feet tall and looked dark. After using his 5 senses to confirm that there were no snakes, insects, rats, or ants in the cave, Yi Fan bent down and entered the cave. Everything was as Kamehameha said. The cave was spacious enough to accommodate the three of them. Because it was close to the volcano, the cave was very dry. Yi Fan cleared a piece of the ground, then used the stones in the cave to make a new stone pot. He activated the cold air to condense ice in the stone pot. In addition, he also dug a 3-foot wide and 1-foot deep hole in the center of the ground for a fire and a pot. The inside of the cave was different from the outside because of the limited space. The fire couldn't be too big. With this deep hole, he could ensure that the flames on the fire wouldn't spread out, and he could also ensure that the heat of the fire was completely supplied to the bottom of the stone pot. It was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. After doing all this, Yi Fan walked out of the cave, picked a dozen large coconuts from the coconut tree near the cave entrance, and carried them into the cave. At that moment, Bamu Chongqing, who was fishing and catching crabs in the sea, and Kamehameha, who was collecting firewood and looking for game, all entered the cave. Bamu Chongqing used seaweed to wrap a large bag of seafood. There were a dozen large and small fat fish and dozens of fresh and fat crabs in the bag. The wooden tortoise and crane were dragging a dried tree stump with a few wild hares and pheasants hanging from it. Yi Fan saw this and shook his head with a bitter smile. If he continued to eat like this, he was afraid that he would gain at least a few pounds in the next 5 days. The storm is coming. All the game is hiding. We only managed to hunt these, Kamehameha said as he untied the game from the stump and put it on the ground. I don't think they are hiding from the storm, but from you, Mr. Guihe, Yi Fan said with a smile as he pulled off a branch from the stump and put it into the hole. Fortunately, this mission only lasts for 5 days. Otherwise, all the game on this island would have been eaten by Senior Gue He, Bamu Chongqing said with a smile as he put down the sword in his hand and sat on the right side of Yi Fan. Ha ha, maybe, Kamehameha said with a smile as he patted the dust off his body and sat cross-legged on the left side of Yi Fan. Yi Fan smiled after hearing this. He activated the Fire Snake Dragon Ball in his body and pointed his finger at the hole filled with firewood. Bang! The firewood burst into flames. Yi Fan placed a stone pot filled with ice on top of the burning firewood and melted the ice into water. Rumble! The sky outside the cave gradually darkened, and the sound of thunder could be heard. Kacha! The light of the lightning illuminated the cave entrance with a purple light. Whoosh! A moment later, a torrential downpour poured down. Once the outside of the cave was dark, the inside of the cave immediately became bright. The flames under the stone pot illuminated the entire cave and made it exceptionally warm. Fortunately, we prepared in time, Bamu Chongqing said with a smile as he added firewood to the stone pot. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be able to drink a mouthful of hot water. This kind of weather is the most suitable for drinking and eating meat. Sigh, unfortunately, there is meat but no wine. It's a pity. Kamehameha leaned lazily on the big wooden stake behind him and said with a smile. What? Mr. Gue He's craving for wine? Bamu Chongqing looked up at Kamehameha and asked. What, does Mr. Yagi not want to drink some sweet and fragrant sake now? Kamehameha asked Bamu Chongqing. Yagi Zhongqing smiled and pulled out a brown leather wineskin from his pocket. He tossed it to Mizuki Tori. Mizuki Tori. This is sake. Kamehameha caught the wineskin and asked in surprise. This is the sake that I brought with Onijiro when I went out for a mission last time, Bamu Chongqing said with a smile. There's still more than half of the wineskin left. Let's give it to Mr. Gue He to relieve his craving for wine. Ha ha ha, thank you, Mr. Yagi. Kamehameha said as he impatiently reached out to uncork the wineskin and took a big gulp. Bamu Chongqing shook his head and smiled. Mr. Yi, have a sip. Kamehameha wiped the remaining wine from the corner of his mouth with his sleeve and handed the wineskin to Yi Fan. Yi Fan took the wineskin and took a big gulp. In Dongying, it was very impolite to refuse a toast. Even if it was a toast from an enemy, it was rare to refuse it. Kamehameha was a sentimental person and had a good chat with him. Of course, he couldn't refuse. Brother Yagi, let's drink together. Yi Fan handed the wineskin to Bamu Chongqing. Bamu Chongqing smiled and took the wineskin. He took a big gulp and handed it back to Yi Fan. Ha ha, great, great. Kamehameha stroked his beard and laughed loudly. It's a great blessing to go out for a mission with the two of you. I only hope that one day we won't become enemies and fight each other, Yi Fan said calmly and took another sip of wine. Brother Bufan, you're a friend. Bamu Chongqing patted Yi Fan's shoulder and said with a smile, I, Bamu Chongqing, can't fight with my friends. Thank you, Brother Yagi. Yi Fan looked at Bamu Chongqing and said, Mr. Yi, don't worry. I'm a little old, but I know who's a friend and who's a foe, Kamehameha said as he took the wineskin from Yi Fan's hand and took a big gulp. Before this, Kamehameha had never seen any of the masters as a friend, including Yi Fan. In his opinion, there was no such thing as an eternal friend, only an eternal use. You use me, I use you. We each get what we need. However, after interacting with Yi Fan this time, Kamehameha found that this young man was not as cold and arrogant as he had thought before. Yi Fan was cold, but it depended on who the other party was. If the other party was a despicable villain like the green-eyed boy, he would be colder than the frost dragon sword in his hand. On the contrary, if the other party was a magnanimous person, he would be more enthusiastic than the leaf-fire divine weapon. Cold and arrogant were not enough to describe this young man's character. Chapter 706. Everything was as Bamu Chongqing had predicted. The storm lasted for an entire day and showed no signs of stopping. Instead, it seemed to be getting more and more intense. The roaring wind blew on the strange rocks around Demon Island, making a horrifying whimpering sound that sounded like the crying of ghosts. At this time, it was already night time. Inside the cave, Yi Fan was lying on the ground that was extremely warm from the fire, resting with his eyes closed. He had been sitting in the cave for an entire day, eating a lot of food and drinking a lot of wine. Coupled with the warm fire in the cave and the sound of rain outside the cave, he felt his eyelids were a little heavy, so he took a short nap. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha were sitting on the ground, eating sashimi and chatting softly in Japanese. They were born and raised in Dongying, and had long been used to kneeling for a long time and the extreme weather outside, so they did not feel tired. The two of them each used a branch to skewer 2 fat pheasants and slowly roasted them on the charcoal fire. "Have you heard?" Kamehameha asked Bamu Chongqing. "Matsumoto Takeyoshi has sent someone to bring back the sword of Kusanagi from Dongying." "I have heard about this," Bamu Chongqing nodded and said. "Before Yagyu Ryanosuk came to Dongying, the sword of Kusanagi was secretly brought back." Kamehameha put the roasted pheasant in his hand under his nose and sniffed it a few times, then said, "I wonder why he brought this national treasure to the great Ming dynasty? He has openly betrayed Tokugawa Ieyasu, so of course, he can't leave such an important artifact in Dongying." Bamu Chongqing poked at the red charcoal and said calmly, "In this old man's opinion, this matter is definitely not that simple," Kamehameha said meaningfully as he continued to roast the pheasant on the charcoal fire. "Oh?" Yagi Zhongqing raised his head and looked at Muin Turtlecrane. "What do you think?" "Tokugawa Ieyasu does have some skills, but with his current strength, he can't shake Matsumoto Takeyoshi's power in Japan," Kamehameha said. "Not to mention that Matsumoto Takeyoshi still has tens of thousands of ninjas hidden among the Japanese. Just the hundreds of black feather ninjas are enough to make Tokugawa Ieyasu not dare to act rashly. Not to mention that great god Seitian is in Japan. In my opinion, Tokugawa Ieyasu wouldn't dare to do anything to Matsumoto Takeyoshi." "You don't dare do anything to Matsumoto Takeyoshi?" Bamu Chongqing smiled and asked Kamehameha, "Then why did Yagyu Ryanosuk come to East China Sea with the Emperor's katana to capture him and bring him back?" "This matter is even more strange." Kamehameha picked up the cowhide wine bag and took a sip. He said, "Ieyasu Grand Shrine and the Shogunate have not interfered with each other for hundreds of years. Why did they suddenly come together this time? Don't you think it's strange?" "This..." Bamu Chongqing frowned. He didn't think of this. Yagyu Ryanosuk is a god. Even His Majesty the Emperor didn't see his real body. How could Tokugawa Ieyasu invite him out of the shrine and send him to capture Matsumoto Takeyoshi? Kamehameha asked, "If that's the case, then Tokugawa Ieyasu is really influential. He can even invite a god. Then in Mr. Kamehameha's opinion, what is the truth of this matter?" Bamu Chongqing asked Kamehameha. Kamehameha looked at Bamu Chongqing and said solemnly, "In my opinion, it's not that Tokugawa Ieyasu is influential enough to invite Ryanosuk. The fact is the opposite. Ryanosuk used Tokugawa Ieyasu's general's order to capture Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Ryanosuk used Tokugawa Ieyasu's general's order to capture Matsumoto Takeyoshi?" Bamu Chongqing frowned and asked, "He's a god. If he wants to capture Matsumoto Takeyoshi, he can just do it. Is there a need to ask for Tokugawa Ieyasu's order?" "You don't understand." Kamehameha smiled and gently turned the roasted pheasant on the charcoal fire. He said with a smile, "It's because he's a god that he has a good reason to act. There's an old saying in the Central Plains, if the name is not right, the words will not go well. Gods are respected and supreme. Of course, they can't act for no reason. Otherwise, they would be meddling in other people's business. Mr. Kamehameha, do you mean that Ryunosuke used Tokugawa Ieyasu's order to act for a good reason? Bammu Chongqing asked Kamehameha. That's right, Kamehameha answered. Matsumoto Takeyoshi is an important minister of Dongying. Yagyu Ryunosuke is the Black Dragon Guardian under Amaterasu God. The two of them have nothing to do with each other. Why are they involved? Bammu Chongqing asked. Isn't it too much of a fuss for Ise Grand Shrine to send out a god to protect a mere mortal? Dongying had been at war since ancient times. Killings had been going on for years. Today, one family was the king, and tomorrow, another family was the king. After one finished singing, another family would appear. There were frequent changes in political power and countless referees. Ise Grand Shrine had never intervened. This time, Matsumoto Takeyoshi hadn't started a rebellion. Why did Ise Grand Shrine suddenly act? And they directly sent out a god like Yagyu Ryunosuke, the reincarnation of the Black Dragon. Bammu Chongqing couldn't understand. If Matsumoto Takeyoshi is just a mere mortal, Ise Grand Shrine wouldn't have to go through so much trouble, Kamehameha said meaningfully. What do you mean by that, Mr. Kizuru? Yagi Zhongqing could tell that there was a deeper meaning in Kizuru's words. Let me ask you, why did Matsumoto Takeyoshi come all the way to the Great Ming Dynasty? Kamehameha asked Bammu Chongqing. Do you even need to ask? Of course, it's for the 9 cauldrons, Bammu Chongqing answered without thinking. Why is he looking for the 9 cauldrons? Kamehameha continued to ask. Whoever obtains the 9 cauldrons will obtain the world, Bammu Chongqing answered. Matsumoto Takeyoshi wants to obtain the world of the Great Ming Dynasty. Of course, he has to find the 9 cauldrons. Is that so? Kamehameha smiled mysteriously and asked as he lowered his head to poke the fire. What? Is it not so? Bammu Chongqing asked. If Matsumoto Takeyoshi only wanted to obtain the world of the Great Ming Dynasty, the Great Ming Dynasty would have already fallen into his hands countless times. Why would he wait until now? Kamehameha raised his gaze and continued. First, his only son, Taro Matsumoto, is the great general of the Great Ming Dynasty. He has hundreds of thousands of soldiers in his hands, and nearly half of the ministers in the court are his people. Second, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's shadow troops are spread all over the Great Ming Dynasty. They are all elites from all walks of life. As long as Matsumoto Takeyoshi wants to, he can completely shake the economic lifeline of the Great Ming Dynasty in a very short time. Third, he has at least 50,000 ninja elites in his hands, as well as the top-notch Black Feather Troop. As the leader of a ninja sect, you should know better than anyone how strong they are. Matsumoto Takeyoshi has everything. As long as he wants to, the world of the Great Ming Dynasty will fall into his hands in less than a month. There is no need for him to find the 9 cauldrons. When Kamehameha said this, Bammu Chongqing immediately frowned and his eyes narrowed. Matsumoto Takeyoshi is not looking for the 9 cauldrons to seize the world of the Great Ming Dynasty. Then what is it for? The person who obtains the 9 cauldrons can indeed obtain the world, but the person who is looking for the 9 cauldrons is not necessarily looking for the world. Kamehameha raised his head and looked at Bammu Chongqing, then turned his head to look at Yifan, who was resting with his eyes closed, and smiled mysteriously. Kamehameha's action made Bammu Chongqing instantly understand. No wonder Yifan is also looking for the 9 cauldrons behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi's back. It turns out that he has another purpose. What kind of shocking secret is hidden in the 9 cauldrons that even Matsumoto Takeyoshi and Yifan are looking for them? What do you mean by that, Kurakaku-san? Bammu Chongqing asked. I can only say up to here. If I continue, my old bones will be buried early, Kamehameha said as he tore off a drumstick from the pheasant on the charcoal fire and put it in his mouth. Is it inconvenient for Kurakaku-san to say? Bammu Chongqing saw that Kamehameha was halfway through his words and asked with a frown. Have you heard of a saying in the Central Plains? Kamehameha did not directly answer Bamu Chongqing's question. Instead, he chewed on the roasted drumstick and asked, "What saying?" Bamu Chongqing asked. "The secrets of heaven cannot be revealed." Kamehameha replied with a smile. Some things can only be known by oneself and cannot be revealed to others. Otherwise, it will disturb karma. Bamu Chongqing understood and slowly nodded. He still believed in karma. The reason was very simple. Yi Fan lying on the side was a living example. If there was no karma, there would not be a demon-slaying conference. Because both sides of the demon-slaying conference had come because of the grievances from their previous lives. At the center of the vortex of grievances was the reincarnation of Eldritch, the current demon king, the young man lying by the fire with his eyes closed, Yi Bufan. So, Ise Grand Shrine acted to prevent Matsumoto Takeyoshi from finding the 9 cauldrons? Bamu Chongqing looked at Kamehameha and asked. "Apart from that, I can't think of any other reason," Kamehameha said. "But ever since he fought with Brother Bufan, Yagyu Ryanosuk hasn't appeared again," Bamu Chongqing said. "Mr. Yi is now Matsumoto Takeyoshi's trump card. With him around, Yagyu Ryanosuk won't act rashly," Kamehameha said. "This is also Matsumoto Takeyoshi's intelligence. He's in a hurry to retrieve the sword of Kusanagi from Japan. Could it be that he wants to deal with Yagyu Ryanosuk in the future?" Bamu Chongqing asked with a frown. "His purpose of retrieving the sword of Kusanagi is indeed to deal with unexpected situations, but it's not just to deal with Yagyu Ryanosuk," Kamehameha said with a smile. "There's another person he needs to guard against. To him, this person is even more terrifying than Yagyu Ryanosuk." "More terrifying than Yagyu Ryanosuk? Who is it?" Bamu Chongqing asked in confusion. Yagyu Ryanosuk was a god. The black dragon's sword in his hand was invincible. His combat power was unparalleled in the world. Who could be more powerful than him? Chapter 707. Is Mr. Yi still awake? Or did we wake Mr. Yi up? Kamehameha was shocked at first, then asked Yi Fan with a smile. His conversation with Yagi Zhongqing was in Japanese. He didn't expect Yi Fan to be able to understand it. Later, he thought about it and realized that it was not surprising. Yi Fan's wife was Japanese, and he had been in Matsumoto Takeyoshi's camp for almost a year. He had been influenced by what he saw and heard, so it was normal for him to understand Japanese. "I was falling asleep at first, but I was attracted by your topic," Yi Fan sat up and said with a smile. "You said that Matsumoto Takeyoshi was in a hurry to retrieve the sword of Kusanagi because he wanted to deal with you?" Bamu Chongqing frowned and asked Yi Fan. "Is there anyone else besides me?" Yi Fan scooped a scoop of hot water from the stone pot with a semicircular coconut shell and blew on it gently as he asked Bamu Chongqing. Bamu Chongqing looked at Kamehameha, and Kamehameha nodded with a smile. The person he was talking about was none other than Yi Fan. "Didn't Matsumoto Takeyoshi have an agreement with you?" Bamu Chongqing asked Yi Fan. "After you help him find the tripod, he will return your wife's true soul to you." "Why? Does he still have a backup plan and wants to get rid of you as well?" "The man is harmless, but the tiger wants to hurt the man." Yi Fan smiled and said, "Matsumoto Takeyoshi has always wanted to get rid of me, but he hasn't succeeded. He has no grudge against you, so why does he want to get rid of you? Is it because of your wife, Fujiwara no Chiko?" Bamu Chongqing frowned and asked Yi Fan. "You must have heard of the rumor." Yi Fan drank a mouthful of hot water and said, "I was born to be a stumbling block for Matsumoto Takeyoshi and Seation." "I've heard of it," Bamu Chongqing nodded and said, "but it's just a rumor. Why would Matsumoto Takeyoshi believe such a ridiculous thing?" "The rumor is true," Yi Fan looked at Bamu Chongqing and said calmly. Bamu Chongqing was stunned. Kamehameha smiled faintly and didn't speak. A few months ago, the 3 demons under Xie Tian's 9 demons secretly came to the Great Ming Dynasty to take my head. Yi Fan said with a smile. If it wasn't for a good friend helping me, how could I still be alive to drink and eat meat with you too? Xie Tian sent the 3 demons to kill you? Kamehameha asked in a shocked voice. He never thought that Xie Tian would make a move against Yi Fan this quickly, and he never thought that Yi Fan would be able to escape from the 3 demons. He didn't know what kind of deity Yi Fan's good friend was. He actually had the ability to force back the 3 demons. Yiming? Cui Ziwen? Pear Blossom Palace? Or Purple Sun Temple? Kamehameha didn't know. He really wanted to know who this person was, but since Yi Fan didn't say it, it meant that he didn't want to reveal this person's identity, so why would he ask for trouble? It's not the Xie Tian faction, it's the 9 Demons Monster King. Yi Fan replied. Kamehameha slowly nodded. After Bamu Chongqing heard this, his face became serious and he didn't say anything. It seemed like what Yi Fan said was true, otherwise the Monster King wouldn't have sent the 3 demons to kill Yi Fan. It seems like Matsumoto Takeyoshi's sword of Kusanagi was indeed used to deal with you, Bamu Chongqing said, but from what I can see, after the demon-killing conference, he has already given up on the idea of making a move against you. He wants to find the 9 cauldrons as soon as possible and draw a line between you and him, minding his own business. As for killing you, he will have Xie Tian do it. As long as he returns my wife's 2 true souls to me, I will mind my own business. Yi Fan said, as for that Xie Tian, as long as he isn't afraid of death, he can come find me. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha looked at each other, but they didn't say anything. These matters were completely beyond the scope of their abilities. Let's not talk about this, we'll talk about the future in the future. Let's roast something to eat. Yi Fan said this while taking a cleaned pheasant. Then he skewered it on a branch, and placed it on the fire to roast. Friends inside, can you let this one in to take shelter from the storm? While Yi Fan was focused on roasting the pheasant, a middle-aged man's voice came from outside the cave. The man's Chinese was a bit stiff, but his voice was very deep. Although the wind was howling outside and the rain was pouring down, it still clearly entered the ears of the 3 people. After hearing this voice, Kamehameha and Bamu Chongqing in the cave were immediately shocked. Judging from the voice, the person wasn't far from the cave entrance, less than 10 feet away. They were so close, but the 2 of them didn't know anything. Who would dare to come to Fiend Island on such a stormy night? Could it be that expert who was proficient in water controlling and psychic techniques? After the 2 of them looked at each other, they simultaneously looked at Yi Fan. They were using their gazes to ask Yi Fan. However, at this moment, Yi Fan's expression was the same as the 2 of them, full of shock. Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha weren't the only ones who didn't sense the person outside the cave. Yi Fan also didn't sense it. This was really unexpected. He closed his eyes and used all his senses to fully perceive the outside of the cave. There was no one outside the cave. After a careful investigation, Yi Fan suddenly opened his eyes, his face full of disbelief. Yi Fan's expression made Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha nervous. Obviously, Yi Fan also didn't sense this person. The 2 of them clenched their swords and prepared to stand up. Yi Fan reached out to stop the 2 of them and shook his head at them. Now that they were in the open and the other party was in the dark, they couldn't act rashly. Otherwise, they would fall into the other party's trap. The 2 of them understood tacitly and sat down again. Brother, you don't have to be so polite. If you want to avoid the storm, feel free to come in, Yi Fan said loudly to the people outside the cave. Thank you all. The middle-aged man's voice came from outside the cave. Immediately after, a middle-aged man wearing a loose white robe and a black hat walked in from the cave entrance. The man had a medium build, fair skin, a thin face, a high nose bridge, and small eyes. He had 2 delicate whiskers under his nose, boots on his feet, a scimitar at his waist, and a black hat on his head that was long and pointy, reaching 1 foot. On his chest, a pattern sewn with golden thread shone brightly under the illumination of the fire. The pattern was a tree with lush branches and leaves. It was very lifelike. Obviously, this was an expert from Gaoli. After seeing this person's attire, Yi Fan thought to himself. When Kamehameha and Bamu Chongqing saw the golden pattern on the man's chest, their expressions immediately changed. "I'm Kim Yaodong. Sorry to disturb you in the middle of the night." As the middle-aged man spoke, he took off the black hat on his head and held it in his arms. He bowed slightly to the 3 of them and said. When Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha saw this, they immediately stood up and bowed to return the greeting. "Sir, are you the head of the famous royal sorcerer group in Gaoli, Kim Yaodong, Master Jin?" Kamehameha asked in surprise. "That's me." The man nodded politely and said, "How should I address the 2 of you?" "I'm Kamehameha from Japan," Kamehameha said. "I'm Bamu Chongqing from Koguryu," Bamu Chongqing said. "So it's the 2 faction leaders. Sorry for the disrespect." The middle-aged man who was called Master Jin quickly nodded and bowed after learning of the 2's identities. Yi Fan narrowed his eyes and looked up and down at the Gaoli expert, carefully observing the person who came. He wanted to find out why he could not detect any of this person's aura earlier. However, what shocked him was that even if this person was standing in front of him, he could not detect any aura from this person. It was like he was a stone or a dead tree. "Master Jin, let me introduce you. This is..." Kamehameha was about to introduce Yi Fan to Kim Yaodong. "I'm Bufan Yi." Yi Fan stood up and said to Kim Yaodong. "Bufan Yi." Kim Yaodong's expression changed when he heard this name. "Are you Eldritch who survived the heavenly tribulation at the demon-slaying conference?" "That's me," Yi Fan nodded and replied. "I didn't expect to meet Mr. Eldritch here." "I'm so lucky," Kim Yaodong said to Yi Fan in shock. "You're too kind, Mr. Jin. Please sit," Yi Fan said and extended his hand to invite Kim Yaodong to sit. Kim Yaodong nodded politely and sat next to the fire with his legs crossed. Kamehameha and Bamu Chongqing handed Kim Yaodong barbecued meat and coconut. Kim Yaodong took it with both hands and thanked them profusely. "Master, why have you come here so late at night?" Kamehameha asked Kim Yaodong as he stoked the fire with a stick. "I'm here on the orders of the Gaoli king to retrieve something," Kim Yaodong said as he drank a mouthful of coconut milk. "Is the thing that the master wants to retrieve the fire meteor that will appear 3 days later?" Kamehameha asked Kim Yaodong. Most of the people who came to Demon Island at this time were here for the fire meteor. Mr. Kamehameha is right. I did come for the fire meteor. Kim Yaodong put down the coconut and said, "Why, are the 3 of you also?" "To tell you the truth, the 3 of us arrived at Demon Island yesterday for the fire meteor," Kamehameha said with a smile. Kim Yaodong frowned after hearing this. Master Kamehameha, Master Bamu Chongqing of Koguryu, and Eldritch's reincarnation, Knight Bufan. The 3 of them appeared on Demon Island at the same time and appeared as a team. What kind of person had the ability to ask the 3 of them to work for him? Kim Yaodong vaguely felt that this was not a simple matter. Even Eldritch had appeared. If things went wrong this time, he might return empty-handed. "I didn't expect it to be such a coincidence," Kim Yaodong said with a smile. "Everyone is here for this thing." Bamu Chongqing and Kamehameha smiled and did not speak. They thought that there would be masters coming to Demon Island, but they did not expect the head of the Gaoli Mage squad to appear in person. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.